bring this HCS Facilities Committee meeting to order. Just for the record, we have Chairman Joe Smith on. We have Chairman Joe Smith on via Microsoft Teams. He couldn't make it to be here with us today. Well, because he's clearly enjoying some palm trees somewhere. We saw in the background. And Ms. Robinson is unable to. The other Mrs. Robinson is unable to be here today with us. Joe, you need to mute yourself.
I'm sorry.
And Mr. Grown, well, clearly he sounds like he's in Margaritaville. And then Mr. Grown is unable to be with us this evening as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So we wanted to, after meeting with the community in a series of community feedback meetings, where we pretty much went on a tour of the county, making sure that we were able to speak to the communities that could possibly be affected by the recommendations that were placed in the mayor's working group facilities plan. We wanted to come back together once we were able to hear from the communities that we met with, receive the information back from the district that was collected, and of course the information that some of us heard and actually attending those meetings, talk about what we heard there, hear from the district what they're thinking as well, as it relates to certain things as we're discussing. And we also wanted to allow a public comment opportunity in which, if you're here and signed up, you were able to do that 30 minutes prior to the meeting, just as we do with any of our other normal board meetings that we have. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank Dr. Robinson and Dr. Stewart and their team, and especially Kate Skomberg and the FACE department for all of their hard work that they did to get this organized, coordinated, and they facilitated a lot of these meetings alongside, they facilitated all the meetings alongside with some of the Hamilton County staff and leadership team that supported them in those efforts. So we want to thank them all for the time that they took beyond their work day to do that for us. We thank you for that as well. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. I did see, I was like, I saw her earlier. Okay. Thank you for that as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And as I stated at the board meeting, we're going to try to go in order. The desire is to go in order of how the meetings were held. And so first we're going to discuss or talk about the results that we received, in which we all have these packets of the feedback, the representation, the number of people attended, and then we have the facilities, the surveys as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started first with with Mrs. Black in her area, with East Lake and the East Side Elementary expansions. Clifton Hills is also included in that expansions. What we know, and then I'll kind of let you lead that piece. But what we know is this meeting took place on September the 28th, 2023. And was the largest attended meeting that we had, with 389 individuals attending that meeting. So from that number, there was
we show up
clearly, which is a great thing. Really, that's really great. Like, I was like, wow, almost 400 people. So wanted to share that, and then Mrs. Black, of course, was there. So Jill, do you want to speak a little to that as well?
We had parents, teachers, and the principals from the 3 elementary schools in the East Side area, East Lake and Clifton Hills. The mayor's working group recommendations were to close Clifton Hills completely, split the students between East Side and East Lake, and expand those 2 schools. However, I attended a lot of the other meetings, and later in the community meetings, Dr. Robertson made a presentation about trying to find the sweet spot as far as the size of elementary schools, keeping it 750 students, and doing the math with the enrollment numbers as they are today. There's 646 students at Clifton Hills. There's 585 students at East Lake Elementary, and there's 542 students at East Side Elementary. So if you split the students that are currently at Clifton Hills in half and divide them between the other two schools, you're at 908 and 865, which is well over that targeted sweet spot. And you're talking about closing a school on the south side of Chattanooga, which is the fastest growing area in all of Hamilton County as far as number of housing units, people moving in. And the population served by Clifton Hills Elementary is fully 50% of those students are walkers. Because many of their families do not own transportation. And there was a lot of concerns expressed about students and families' ability to participate in schools that are further away from them, not walking distance anymore outside the Clifton Hills neighborhood, due to, if a kid comes up with a fever or vomits in the middle of the day, and they've ridden the bus there and their parents don't have any transportation to come and get them in the middle of that school day, what happens to those kids? Sit in the nurse's office, get put sick on a bus with 50 other kids? Like what those were all a lot of concerns. And there was it was very evident that particular neighborhood needs to maintain a school that's within walking distance for the families that are served by that school. And so the desire is to find another plan for Clifton Hills, whether it is find another property that we can build a new Clifton Hills on that's still in the neighborhood, whether it's expanding or renovating the school that is there. Because it when you look at just the numbers, it doesn't make sense to immediately dismantle a school just to immediately have the other two schools completely full and then have to drop back and possibly build a new school anyway. And so that was basically a lot of the concerns that were expressed by the families and honestly, in a lot of discussions that I've had with teachers, just the concern of the number of teachers that would be required to be on a team of really large schools when you get in that 800, 900, 1,000 student numbers. Teachers work in teams by grade level, and once you get above a certain size in a working team, a lot of times they would have to split in half, or there wouldn't ever be a time during the day where they could all meet together. There were just a lot of concerns about creating schools that were that big.
And we all, in our packet, of course, received, and I would like to say in the feedback overview, I like the way it's sectioned off. So, like, it talks about community concerns and preferences, desires for alternative solutions and inclusivity, and then expectations for future school facilities. So, we've all had time to read over this, but pretty much the sentiment does go with what Ms. Black said. Transportation and the logistics of that is a key concern for that community. Some families were concerned about the potential trauma or safety issues that could arise from that. And then in the desire for alternative solutions, of course, like Ms. Black said, the responses for aligning with the broader community sentiments. And then talking about if the plan was to go forward, or if the expansion was to go forward, that the community shared the desire for spaces that support comprehensive personalized learning, including adequate play areas, gyms, and auditoriums. The preference for a single consolidated building structure at the East Lake location rather than multiple buildings was also noted, along with room to accommodate any future growth. There were, like she said, concerns about the instructional time. So just trying to go back over this for you all so you'll know. But concerns about instructional time and the increase in class size because of the increase in school size. And the community also expressed the need for any new plans to continue the culture of the current schools in any new space. So what we do know about some of these schools, these particular schools in this community, is that the culture of the community, the culture of the schools, and how they all come together as one big community is very important to them. So overall, what we hear here is that whatever happens, they want to they don't want to lose that in the process. And I think that's very important to consider. And of course, I'm sure all communities feel that way. But that was a consistent theme that I saw um, in this particular area. So I have some board members that want to say some things. We have Marco and then Rhonda.
So I'm kind of approaching these conversations from a couple perspectives, and so Clifton Hills falls within that. I also was able to go there and listen and talk to families that were there. Two things come up in the conversation. One is the topic, and I'll bring it here, the elephant in the room that gets mentioned, so it's not really an elephant in the room, but it's the question of what is mega, right? And so mega is thrown out. We don't want mega schools. What is mega? What is the right size? When we talked about this a few years back when I was on the board, that's actually the phrase we use, right? Like right sizing our schools, right? Like there is a number that in our community is not something we have a grasp on yet, right? So if we were to talk, I'm going to throw a crazy number so that nobody starts throwing numbers back at me, but let's say we talked about a 2,000 student school. We're not used to that. We don't know how to manage that. We don't have the experience yet. That would be out of the question. At the same time, there are schools that we would say today aren't not only inefficient or aren't efficient because they're so small, which is obviously one concern, but also we can't provide as many resources at a number that's too small. And so if we talk about a 200, 250 student school, they won't have some resources. Some people argue back to me that that's okay. But I actually remember and many years back when Ms. Jones spoke about Harrison Bay, how seeing a new school and the resources, you realize that students have a right to that. So that's the first thing is what's mega. I've heard over and over in the meetings that we are talking about those sizes between 650 and 750, and that is maybe 800, but that is what we're used to. We've seen that work in our county. We've been able to see a culture of a school maintained within those numbers, and that seems something that we have some experience handling and managing well. There were some schools mentioned in a lot of these discussions that, and I'm not an expert of that some people had concerns that were so large that weren't, the community of the educators within that school was lost because it's so large. So I think we have to keep that in mind. The second thing, as we approach these discussions, to me is just an issue of priorities. The number I hear out there is $200 million. I don't know if that's an official number or not. But in today's costs of construction and cost of work, if that were the number, or 250 or somewhere on there, that goes really fast. Like it's not going to last, I don't think, the full 6 meetings we had, right? Like it's going to go really fast. And so for me, what is a priority and how do we prioritize? So back to Clifton Hills. I'm sorry because that was a long answer to how I'm viewing these conversations as a whole. What I left with, there was a lot of involvement at Clifton Hills that's exciting, but a lot of it was due to confusion. And I'm going to say that straight out. A lot of parents that I spoke to directly, and I am blessed to be able to speak to parents in their own language, thought the school was getting shut down that week almost. And they were coming terrified that their kids were not going to have a school to go to. Literally one parent telling me, where is my child going to go to school if you shut us down? Or are they not going to be provided a school? that actually made me very frustrated and upset, that I felt a lack of communication, confused parents. And I think we, in this whole thing, could communicate more effectively, but that's never going to be the case, right? When I said to parents, we're talking about something that will happen in 2 or 3 years, it was like, oh, okay, like this isn't happening tomorrow. But if we talk about mega, already, as Ms. Black said, Clifton Hills is getting very close to that and is already at the size. The other schools aren't too far from that. But when we talk about priorities, I will say this, and you know, and I've said it publicly too. So, but the current status of the building of Clifton Hills, in my opinion, and I've used this phrase very often, is not worthy of the students of Hamilton County and Hamilton County as a whole. So our facilities there need a drastic investment. I'm not gonna pretend to know what the solution is to that, but I do think my takeaway from this is, and I feel this way about other schools we'll talk about, is it is clear that even though families are concerned, or families are scared, or teachers are concerned, or teachers at other schools are concerned because they don't want the blending in, the current situation of Clifton Hills facilities is not acceptable. And so a question to you all, is that a correct perception of mine, that where the facilities are today at Clifton Hills isn't something we can continue for longer? So correct, right? So I see you nodding. So anyway, so for me, Clifton Hills hits one of my top priorities as to, within this limited money that we will have in very expensive projects, we cannot allow Clifton Hills to move on. And I do hear the fact that both Eastside Elementary and East Lake Elementary, or East Lake Academy, Elementary, sorry, yeah,
the middle school.
that's right. East Lake Elementary are almost at those numbers, and the blending of that wouldn't work. So, so I hear that. If we're going to say mega, or you know, if we're going to say that the numbers we can manage are between 650 and 800 or 850, we're almost there. So I would agree with a lot of what we said. But to me, what stays firm is Clifton Hills, as is, cannot continue for another decade in the way that it is if we have the resources to invest into it.
I go.
Sorry. Got Ron first.
Well, that's okay,
Ron,
go ahead.
Oh.
I was just gonna say thank you, Marco. I forgot that there might be folks watching, or folks in the community, who are not familiar with the Clifton Hills School. I'm not sure what year it was built. It was one of the proposed rebuilds when the governor proposed a chunk of money in the state budget to rebuild schools in a flood zone. It is in a flood zone. There's about 16 portables. Is that correct? And so there's, you know, not only the condition of the current building, but also the use of portables to accommodate the students in the community. It presents a safety issue because we can only, you know, safely secure a standing building. It's a lot harder to provide a secure and safe school when you've got half of your student population in portables that you can't secure. And so it does maintain.
Publicly say
Yeah.
that we are doing everything
Yeah.
in our community to keep those students
Yeah.
safe and secure.
It's a lot more difficult. And so even though I maintain that Clifton Hills needs a school in their community, I do agree that your assessment is correct and that we cannot push this like another 10 years down the road, that they need some sort of answer and a facility that is worthy of our students. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I'll go here, Chris. Yeah, you answered one of the questions I was going to say. I thought it was in a flood zone.
Well,
and
be clear, part of the property is in the flood zone.
Okay.
The school itself nor the portables are in the flood zone. It's
Okay.
the front part of the property that's part of the flood zone.
Okay,
Doesn't
that,
mean they don't flood though.
yeah, but, okay, so you have the, that, and then, how far away, as the crow flies, if you split those students up and then added on to the other schools, and I understand I don't like the mega school ideal either, but if there's gonna have to be something done, because you couldn't probably build on that property, because where you would build onto it would probably be in a flood zone, am I wrong? I'm just trying to get
There's
a-
potential that there's part of the property you could. It would be challenging. East Lake, you know, I can't give you exact. East Lake's pretty close to
Pretty close.
Clifton Hills.
Okay.
East side is a little bit of ways.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up in this conversation that presents challenges is it's not just about adding on. It obviously there would have to be some rezoning that took place.
That's what's gonna be my next
And
question. so.
if you look in that area, you have Orchard Knob Elementary that's relatively close as well that has room, but then you've got to go all the way up to Hardy before you find another school that has room in it. And so although the schools are relatively close to each other, trying to find added capacity would mean that you would have to go all the way up through Orchard Knob and rezone all the way up to Hardy, which impacts, when we looked at this about 4 years ago, some of you may remember us having this conversation to try to deal with some of the overcrowding. It was going to impact like 1,400 families. And it's just the disruption that rezoning would create, we didn't feel like was worth it. And so I add that to just put into the conversation. The busing, you know, kids walking to school and just the proximity, that's a consideration. But bigger consideration that caused us pause after we looked deeper at this is just the disruption with rezoning all of
Yeah.
downtown to make the schools the right size.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Faye?
Of all the properties mentioned, which property would best suit all facilities as far as what we would like in a new school, as opposed to the maintenance for an old, outdated school versus the efficiency of the new school?
I mean, I think we have a lot of schools that are good examples of what we would want for kids. East Lake and East Side are both schools that are, you know, 20-ish, 25 years old, somewhere around there, and they're all in really good shape. And so those are examples of schools where, you know, they're a good size, good facility. Now they're going to need. I mean, you get 20 years old, that's when you start looking at having to replace HVACs and things like that. So they need updating as we go forward. But all of the majority of the elementary schools downtown, except for Clifton Hills, are relatively new. Not new. They're in relatively good shape as compared to Clifton Hills.
And the traffic flow?
You know, the traffic flow doesn't seem to be a problem at Clifton Hills, and part of it, I think, goes back to, again, the number of walkers and the proximity of the zone and the cluster of housing that's right around the campus. And it sits back off of, you know, the main road, so there's quite a bit of roadway leading up to the school. Even though it's not a great setup for a car line, it doesn't have as many traffic problems as you would think.
Is there a minimum limit that we want walkers for?
No, not, you mean in terms of pickup? Like a
Correct.
bus? Yeah, I mean, there's some, and I'm speaking about this off the top of my head. If Brandon Allen's here, he'd know it. I think we have a set limit, like if someone lives within, I want to say it's either 3/4 of a mile or a mile, that, you know, bus transportation is a little bit more limited.
Thank you.
Ron, do you? Okay, Mr. King, I have to make sure she could have been.
You started to talk about it, and then you answered some other things. I think you were going to talk about the time on the bus, and I didn't ever. So if these were rezoned, one's closer than the other, what's the bus time for students going to the east side?
Yeah, the bus time wouldn't be bad, but again, the way you would have to do it, it wouldn't just include rezoning East Side and East Lake. You would have to rezone most likely Calvin Donaldson, East Side, East Lake, Orchard Knob Elementary, and Hardy, possibly even, Brown and Battle. And so that's where it gets super complicated with this scenario. And what we have kind of internally been talking about, I think I've talked to several of you about, this one in particular seems to be one of the most complicated scenarios. And so it's caused me and people that are on our team to talk about, is this one that we think about differently? Like maybe we do think about, is there a place to add on and renovate the existing building so that we can lower the number of portables and get some more years about it? Do we take a pause and see if there's property? I know the city is undergoing a kind of a audit of their properties. Do we press pause for a moment and see if there's a property nearby that would be suitable for a building down the road? So, I mean, what you're not asking for my recommendation, but what I hear you saying is what we're thinking as well, in terms of this probably doesn't make sense the way that it was proposed. And we probably need to think about it differently. Again, whether that's renovating and adding on, whether that's seeing if we can find savings somewhere else to build new on that property or a different location. But those are some of the same thoughts we're having.
Thank you.
Mr. Perez.
So, just again, as I think the point of this meeting is kind of to encourage us in one direction. So I want to encourage you in that direction. I am concerned when I hear put a pause, see if the city, because those pauses sometimes can be very long pauses in the way that we move in government. And I personally, in these meetings that I have, really took away that Clifton Hills is a priority. We need to find something about it as soon as possible. I still would love to see it in that stage one, but I do agree that the consensus seems to be not.
Be clear, let me say press pause on this recommendation and consider other recommendations. I do think the way you described of thinking about this in totality, like there's considerations there of there are going to be limited resources, and at some point we are going to have to put some priority order to each of these. And it may be saying that, maybe this one gets pushed back, maybe this one gets more something different than we thought.
I pushed again if.
Okay, that's all I was gonna say.
So if I understand this then, so East Lake and East Side are both in shape that we would not have to do anything to them if we put work into Clifton Hills. So.
Right. I mean, when I say press pause, like I'm saying let's press pause on putting additions at East Lake and East Side and
Right.
consider an
Right.
alternative option that would serve the kids at Clifton Hills way they deserve to be served.
Right, okay, all right.
And I'll say East Lake and East Side, the buildings they have are still in great shape, but there would have to be an addition to accommodate for sure. It's a lot easier on the East Side property, I think, to add on than it is at East Lake, 'cause you've got like a whole situation where you have to close down a road but I just want to say that I agree with you, Marka, that I still want to see Clifton Hills. I would still prefer to see Clifton Hills in phase one. Whatever we're going to decide to do, the building's 59 years old, and it, we need to find a solution for that community and that school. It does make me hesitate when we say we're going to wait until phase two to address this, and it was in such a condition that it got the governor's attention to be one of 10 schools to be rebuilt by the state when that was a proposed inclusion in the state budget. And so I do strongly feel that it needs to remain a priority for sure.
So again, I'm not disagreeing with y'all, but this body's going to have to decide with limited resources, something's not going to be able to get done. And so like that's part of this conversation is all of these are priorities or we wouldn't be talking about them. And to be clear about the governor's thing about being in a flood zone, the governor nor anybody in his staff walked through the building. It was simply because it was in a flood zone.
Right. Okay. Is there any other comment on, oh, sorry, Faye.
Has there been a flood there? And is it in a 500-year or a 100-year flood zone?
I don't know about 500 years. In the last 100, I mean, there are times where the bottom portion of that property floods. I mean, we had to add between some of the portables this past summer an elevated walkway because the water puddles there. But in terms of like actual flood, it's again the front part of the property that creates the issue. They've done something on the drainage that's made it a little bit better, but that's a legitimate problem on the front part of the property.
It's zoned as such.
Yes.
Thank you.
The first day of school last year,
Yeah, it's
When
not
it-
flooding the building. It
Yeah.
floods the.
it floods the
front.
walkways, but like some of the kids in the portables couldn't get to the main building to have lunch, and the staff had to like wade out through the water and take lunch to the portables because they couldn't get to the other building. The rain was really bad all over the county the first day of school last year, but at Clifton Hills they were stuck.
Worse.
Yeah.
Joe?
Thank you. And also, so I wanted to go back to that piece about being on the governor's radar, not just flood zone, but then just remind me, please, the capacity of that Clifton Hills, where we are right now. It's like 120% or,
Yeah, it's. I think this may be outdated, but it's
Clifton.
over 100%.
Clifton Hills is, the maximum capacity is what, 468?
Yeah, but that, again, remember, we're looking at MGT that doesn't take into account portables, and that's where it's hard to calculate.
well, but what I'm saying is the original
building
structure is
yeah.
well over 100%.
yes.
So that brings me to my next point that when we talk about Clifton Hills, and maybe I just haven't heard this or haven't paid attention to it, but I know I'd like to hear maybe from the regional planning agency just around downtown in general, because as we talk about, you talk about the rezone, talk about how that's going to affect, multiple schools. I think when we think about Clifton Hills, I mean, I'd like to hear the numbers. I mean, we know population. We look at Howard High School, the population growth and how much it has exploded, and what that looks like among those cluster of elementary schools. To know that, and when you talk about the fact that, something's not going to get done, but the reality is among those cluster of schools, I don't know that we see a slowdown in growth in the foreseeable future. So. I mean, I do like the direction of the conversation around what can be done at Clifton Hills, just for the simple fact that if schools are merged, I don't know that's accommodating the growth. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, we can provide a better facility for students and families, and hey, listen, you've got a better building to attend, and hopefully some better resources available when you're at the building. But at the end of the day, we're still going to be in a position, within 6 or 8 years where that building's now at capacity also. And so what does that look like in terms of what's best use of the funds, and just knowing that the problem's not going to stop anytime soon. So anyway, just I'd love to, and maybe somebody on this board or would take that on. I'd be willing to do it, just to reach out to the RPA and go, just some data around, what's it look like? I mean, I just know I got a lot of that when we were doing East Hamilton Middle School, and we were talking about at that time District 7 and 9, and how almost 50% of all residential and commercial growth was happening in those two districts when I first got on the board. And so just kind of looking at, all right, where are people living? Where are they moving? And we know they're moving to this part of town. So,
Those conversations we're part of. The growth in that area that we've seen in the last 7 years is not necessarily from permits being pulled. It's just from a change of the number of families moving into the houses that were there
Right.
that have school-aged children and more school-aged children. And so the growth in that area is not the same as the growth in 7 or 9 or 10 now. Those are because of permits being pulled.
what you could plan for.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, but what would that?
But school enrollment, I think, obviously we have that, but I'm saying to be able to look at the trends here over the last few years and go, here's how fast it's growing by a year on average, and so what are we going to be looking
The
at?
question is downtown though, are we seeing it table off, right? It's the first year, in 5 or 6 that, Howard's enrollment is stayed level. They were going up 100,
A semester.
200 a year,
Yeah.
and this is the first year that it's kind of leveled off,
Okay.
so.
But what would that look? Well, and maybe this might be a conversation or a great segue into the next topic, next school topic. But and I hear you, Dr. Robertson. But there's also talk of the Lookouts moving downtown. There's also talk of that area right there, and for whatever reason, they keep on building these apartments and condos. I don't know who can afford them because I can't.
Amen, sister.
Even if I sold everything and lived in my car in the parking lot of one, I probably couldn't. But they're affordable living, right? But nevertheless, just what does that look like? Because I know as cities change and grow and become more metropolitan, and I guess we moving toward Charlotte from Mayberry. Just keep moving closer to that. Or Riley. Is that where they used to go on anywhere from Mayberry to Riley? But anyway, y'all don't watch the Andy Griffith Show before.
I do.
What did they would go to the big town? It was from Mayberry to what? Raleigh?
Saint, or
Mount Pilot.
Mount Pilot.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we move on up to Mount Pilot, because we ain't got to Raleigh yet, but as we move on, we want to be there, but we're not there. As we move on, people do, like in other metropolitan areas, they live downtown, and their kids go, I know people that have moved downtown for their kids to go to battle, just to be zoned because they didn't get a magnet seat. So I think there is opportunity for further conversation with RPA on just what that looks like. If there's possibility for them, if they could just get us those numbers, because I don't know who's supposed to live in them unless they all single people, but they keep talking about single family dwellings, but to be a family, you gotta have a kid, right? It's supposed to be a mother, dad, and 2.5 kids. Like, I'm curious as to what that is going to look like. And as the urban renewal gentrification happens, like, what does that look like? Like, because people are coming downtown. And so what is that going to look like? Because I'm like Mr. Wingate, if we build it, is it going to be big enough? I personally don't want the next board, because I won't be here for this, but I don't want the next board having to do an East Hampton situation because it wasn't enough space. I'm out of here in 2026. But I'm just saying, what we had to deal with East Hamilton. So, like, we had to build a whole nother East Hamilton Middle because East Hamilton Middle High wasn't big enough after they thought it was going to be big enough. Right. So, just what does that look like? I think is a good thing. But I think that's a good segue into the next building and what maybe conversation for what that could look like.
What you're seeing downtown, and we've had this conversation in other parts about apartment complexes, and some apartment complexes, especially ones that are uber expensive, you're not seeing the traditional, 2 parents, 2.5 kids moving in there. A lot of it is younger professionals or, older professionals. And so the downtown trends, again, we haven't seen a ton of growth, seen it since 6 years ago, and you've seen it at all these schools, but starting to level out. I think the East Hamilton actually, like, if you think about it historically, that planning wasn't really that bad. And what I mean by that is you had a school that for 10 years had a middle and a high school, and served that community well, and then we had to build another middle school. So I don't know that was necessarily a bad plan on the board's part. I think in the downtown area, there's a lot to consider with the Bend. There's a lot to consider with Chattanooga Housing Authority and what they're doing, the west side area, and then the stadium. I don't predict that the stadium and the Bend developments are going to have a huge impact on our enrollment. Chattanooga Housing Authority, that may change it up a little bit because they're gonna add some units and you may see people moving back in, because right now, the opposite's been happening, people have been moving out. And so, it may create some space, but we do currently have some space at Battle and Brown. Part of this conversation, and it's one that we need to have as a community as well, is, this is probably gonna be a topic that is gonna raise some emotions, but we've got a lot of pre-K seats in our elementary schools. And I'm not saying that we do away with pre-K seats, but do we think differently about, a pre-K center that serves the downtown area instead of having, 40 kids in this school, 30 in that? You see what I'm saying? So we could open up capacity by thinking differently about our pre-K seats and where they're located. You're talking about the Gateway building downtown, and we had that meeting. That's kind of next on the agenda. What came out of those conversations, and we kind of put it out there, is the possibility of moving an existing school into that space. It's a large building. It's a 185,000 square feet of existing space that obviously would have to be renovated to accommodate schools. I believe that from conversations I've had with you guys individually, with the mayor's office, that there is some a coalition around like the idea that we want to see some CTE pathways at that building. I think the question is like, how does that roll out? We know, for example, with Blue Cross, the partnership with Blue Sky, you hear a lot of people talking about a computer science pathway. I think that would make a lot of sense. We know that a company like Novonix is down at the Bend already, so maybe there's something around EV technology and or car design, right? That would make sense. I think we also would be smart to leave some space in that building for pathways that we maybe don't know about right now. As the Bend develops and other people move in, businesses, I think we should be thoughtful around partnering with people that are close to that building so that apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships can take place easier. Downtown's changed. I know we like to talk about Kirkman, but if you think when Kirkman was downtown, what did downtown look like? It looked quite a bit different than it does now. What I mean by that is the industry downtown, US Pipe, Wheeling, Founder, like things like that are being replaced by the need for programmers, data analysts, and so those pathways will look a little bit different, but there seems to be common belief that part of that building should have CTE pathways. I think that the hard part of the conversation is, are those joined together, which I think they should be, but for this board to consider, are they joined together in the same school, or is there a separate program in that building as well?
So, what would happen? Oh, I'm sorry, Marco.
No, you go first.
Okay, I didn't see you. Okay. So, what would happen? Okay, if that proposal was the case with the CTE courses in the Gateway building, what would happen to the investments that these companies have made in other sites? Like the Saudi Future Ready is amazing. Like, I mean, if you haven't been there, it's that Future Ready with the coding and design. That's amazing. I was in the 5 minutes. It was like, can you do a logo for me? Because the kids was rocking it. So, what would happen to that? What would happen to? It's a Blue Cross one at Red Bank. Is
Red
it
Bank.
one? So, like, what would happen to the current existing Future Readies? Like, what would happen to those spaces? Like, would they go back to classroom spaces? And if they went back to classroom spaces, then technically those schools they're not the ones needing class. Like, what is that?
Yeah, I think that they coexist and strengthen each other. I don't get the feeling from any of our partners in Future Ready Institutes that they're stepping away. But I think there are, we've talked about this for a minute. One of the next iterations, I think, of Future Ready Institute should be us doubling down on pre-apprenticeship and work-based learning opportunities. And so I think they coexist the same way that, the Career Construction Center coexists with other Future Ready programs, in our schools. So I don't see them competing, see them actually enhancing one another.
Mr. Perez and then Mr. Connor.
So that meeting was a little confusing to me, because a lot of the concern, and it's sent there in the notes that were sent to us, was from CCA parents, almost already assuming that this was a done deal to move CCA over there. And I personally, maybe I didn't read deeply, but I was caught off guard by that level of concern. Again, as I think we repeated in all those meetings, these were recommendations. We're here to listen. Like, this is truly the purpose of the meetings. My second concern, and I understand, the desire to return to something that was lost in Chattanooga, like Kirkman, right? And wanting that. But I'm looking at priorities right now, right? And so for me, when we had a discussion here about facilities and people from the Howard School came to visit us, I remember Commissioner Graham was in the meeting, and he mentioned the TVA building, which is mostly empty. That's a very complicated building, but never did we know that less than a year later, the Gateway building was going to be made available, right? And we were going to be, and I want to say, instead of Blue Cross Blue Shield having the opportunity to sell it for anything they wanted to, they let us have it. And I'm very thankful. I mean, obviously we bought it, but they didn't put it out to bid for the highest bidder. They let us compete for it. So my question is, does the Gateway building, because in my other priorities are two buildings we already own, which is the Cigna building and the Gateway building. And I don't want those just sitting there. I don't want us to make an investment in the purchase of buildings that we don't do anything with for the next 10 years. So that building, something has to happen. But is the Gateway building a way to help balance the high numbers, the high population of other communities, instead of looking at, let's build a whole new idea that we haven't had here? So
Yeah, I definitely think so, but I think we talk about the highest and best use. I think there are other ways to deal with the overcrowding issue at Howard, and we've talked about some of those, right? And go there. I think the reason CCA comes up is because naturally, if you think about a program that could fit at the Golden Gate building, I mean, you're 11 acres. You can't put an athletic field. You can't put.
I like you called it the Golden Gate building.
Isn't that what it's called?
Gateway.
It's Gateway, Golden
It used to be
Gate,
Golden
whatever.
Gate when we was kids. I got your back.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
It was theirs.
Golden
It was
Gate.
theirs, and it was Channel 9. It was the Golden Gateway with Sean.
I'll keep calling it the Golden Gate. So Gateway building, it's 11 acres, so you can't put some of the things that a typical high school would need. And you think about CCA, well, you could put the things that they need. So I think naturally it came up. I think that's a strong consideration for a number of reasons, because we still don't have problem solved for Normal Park. They're in two buildings that are not in great shape, and if you can move CCA into another spot that is fit for their programming, then you've got that building that Normal Park can move in, and we've taken two of our biggest deferred maintenance buildings off of our book. So I think that it naturally comes into the conversation.
Mr. Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we moving on now? So we're doing, okay. So, if you don't mind, if I could just talk a little bit, because Tiffany's not here, but as Marco perfectly addressed, the conversation line was almost exclusively about CCA or Kirkman. So I feel like I can take that over since CCA is currently in District 6. I wrote down a few things from the Renovate the Flagship. The biggest things that came from it, that when we put it in, was desire to maintain CCA's unique identity and educational focus, expanding into technical pathways while preserving arts education, an interest in improved facilities to meet those needs. And then in priorities, the biggest things that came up were maintain CCA's unique identity, educational focus, and safe space for the students to be themselves, improved facilities, and access to educational programming by all students. Dr. Roberts, you started on it, and it bears the exact repeating of saying that with digital design and programs that are looking towards the future, that is the perfect marrying of art in the way that the students of CCA and the interest of moving forward deserve. Being able to take their craft and their safe space and their ability to learn and turn that into useful and utilizable items in their futures. I think one of the best terms that we use is future ready classes, because that's exactly what they are. But another aspect of that we need to remember that you touched on a moment ago was being ready for whatever the future has, so that we're not strong-arming ourselves into one way of learning and one set of what the future looks like, because the future is drastically different than 20 years ago when some of these buildings were built, and drastically different will it be in another 20 years. So I think that at the Golden Gateway site, I believe that we're talking in the right path, and if CCA is the path that we move over there, the one thing that I will stand and say loud and clear is that CCA will not move without a linear or improved movement. They do need things like that. There's all kinds of different needs at CCA. They are addressing them in amazing and profound ways by putting a recording studio in what used to be a crawl space and turning a ladies' locker room into a kiln. So imagine what they could do with the right tools. So if we do that for them and manage to combine the arts in the right way, then we've really made our kids future ready.
That sounds really great, Ben. I do want to say, having grown up here and attended public schools here all my life, historically, that's what happens. The magnet schools, the new programs, get the new schools, whether they're the old building that gets renovated or the building that we bought that we renovate, and the schools that are in the traditional settings continue to stay where they are. Now, I understand what you're saying. I think what troubles me is that the same thing that Marco said in the beginning about just kind of being concerned about the school already feeling like it was their building, was the same way that some other student communities have felt around Hamilton County when things have happened. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. So like when Howard Connect came about, I remember there being this strong sense from the Battle community. This is no slight to Battle, because I love Mr. Goins and I have a niece that goes to Battle. But I remember the Battle community feeling like Howard Connect was going to be Battle Middle, for lack of better terms. I don't think it was considered that children live in that zone that didn't have a middle school or anything. It was just like, we want that school. And it's disheartening for children who have no choice but to go where they are. And we ideally, I think all 11 of us, minus the one, everybody here or not here, wants our children to be in schools that are nice and aesthetic and meet their programming and academic needs. We want that. But if we are prioritizing and thinking about it, we do have to look beyond just that. And I'll say for myself, I literally sat in Howard that night of their meeting and said, well, why we can't move CCA over here? They have a beautiful auditorium. They have all of this stuff. Why can't we shift Howard over there and put something else over there? Like, I was thinking all these different, because with 185,000 square feet, I was thinking of a lot of stuff that could go in the Gateway. And when I was a little girl, it seemed really, really big to me at the top, where Zares and Red Food Store was. So I was just thinking of all kinds of things could go in that building. So I do think that that's one option. I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I just think as we go through this process and thinking about a lot of things, what does that look like for several other school communities as well? Because like Marco said, at this point, we have a building and a building. What is the best use of those buildings? Making us good stewards of the dollars and of the responsibility that we have to students. So I do believe it gets complex. Once again, I think it's a great option. But I don't, and this is a time that I'm gonna bring up a Rhonda quote. So this is a time when we kind of see eye to eye here, but it typically happens that sometimes our magnet programs get something before our traditional kids get things, traditional school students, our magnet students get, and it's kind of complex because, I mean, if you weren't on a magnet, some children live in spaces where their schools are perfectly fine if they weren't on a magnet. And so I kind of go back and forth with the pluses, the pros and cons to a lot of proposals. And I was a magnet kid. So, I mean, I think the role of magnet programs, but I said the same thing with CSLA. I said the same thing about the battle situation and Howard Connect. That's just how I see it. We do have to just think about that because in a minute that's going to be not the exception but the norm, and I don't want that to become that way. So we have to just carefully think that through. Rhonda,
Yeah,
Jill, and then being
Okay, there's a few things you said there, Caritza. You know, moving Howard Connect to Gateway, is that what you were talking about? I kind of misunderstood.
That or
would be-
Howard High or something, because I'm thinking,
Okay, well, let's just say moving Howard Connect there because it's a magnet school. Those kids come from everywhere. And either, were you talking about a middle school there at Howard, opening up a middle school at Howard? What were you talking about the middle school? What were you
no,
saying?
I was saying when we opened up the middle school at Howard, initially, you know, it was this, they wanted a strictly all magnet middle school there. Remember, there was a lot of discussion.
Right.
Well, we were saying we really can't, that's not fair to the children that live in that zone
Right,
that
exactly.
do not have, because
Exactly.
Franklin Middle was closed.
Right.
Eastlake Academy was pretty much at capacity. And it was just kind of like, is that right? Like, is that right to do? Which is why the zone became,
Well, why couldn't you
the
maybe-
schedule
May I
became
provide some
allocated.
clarity around Howard Connect?
You can, but I lived it on the
Well,
other
well,
end.
no,
But
no.
you can, go ahead.
It's not a magnet school. Eventually, there were those discussions when it was created, but as Howard Connect is now, it's not a magnet school. It's a fully open enrollment school.
Right.
So-
when it started,
Which is a magnet school.
When it started, Jill, Tucker and
It is a magnet school.
Dr. Hollander here. When that school started, it was a zone school, and because I remember having arguments, for lack of better terms, with Dr. Johnson. Like, you got to make sure that some of those seats are reserved for the children that are zoned and living like.
And they are.
Right, but I'm just saying. So
Yeah.
I know it's open enrollment now.
It's open enrollment, and like there's a percentage of seats that are
Well-
saved for Battle and Calvin Donaldson students
Well-
who live in that.
Well, why don't we
zone.
just, here again,
I mean, we can talk about
Hey,
that
we're
in the
gonna-
Howard piece, but I just was saying when Marco brought that up, I did think I was sitting in Howard that day in the auditorium thinking the same thing when I looked at that beautiful stage, knowing that people like Aretha Franklin performed there. I mean, if I was a kid, I'd love to be on the stage where Aretha Franklin performed. But
So
just thinking about.
again,
Okay.
I mean, like you think about moving Howard Connect or
well, no, I'm just talking about if we're going to make a truly, just to make that, to put Howard Connect, you could put them anywhere if they're coming from all over the county. Just put them put them in. They don't have to be down Howard. I'm saying if we need more room in Howard, whether at the middle school or the high school, move Howard Connect out. That'll free up some space there, and which has been a problem that we've had. Why not move them to the Gateway? Also, I know what's going to end up happening because this started 20 years ago. This is nothing new for me. The old city high school will be Normal Park High School.
I think
It will
yeah.
absolutely be because they started
Oh,
work
no,
on this
no.
20
Well,
years ago.
Yeah, Yeah.
So I know what I'm talking about. I live this, I won't say Hades, with Joe Connor and Chip Baker. When they were on the school board, they started this back then, so that's been about 20 years ago. So it will be the new Normal Park High School because they've been working on that for years. Now, what's going to happen though, if Normal Park gets thrown high school, we're going to have another problem because they're going to have athletic facilities. They're going to have all of these other things that go along with the high school. Magnet schools are not supposed to have athletic facilities, but as we all know, that's not the case anymore. But it was the case when I got on the board 20 years ago. They weren't going to have athletics, and now they all have athletics. And that will be another thing if they become a high school. Plus, there again, that does not address the overcrowding there because those are all magnet schools. And those little kids that live in Hill City down there were promised they'd go to Normal Park Elementary, and they never have been allowed to go. And I do not understand, Caritza, why the NAACP has not taken that up.
Because Mr. Mapp got old and the new one.
Yeah, Mr. Mapp, I talked to Mr. Mapp about that. But we have, that's something that's always bothered me. I'm the only person on this board that's ever fought for those kids at Hill City to be able to go to Normal Park because it's so unfair they can see a school right down the street and they can't go to it. If you're going to make those schools an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school, I think they ought to be zoned. Those kids ought to be zoned. That ought to be a zoned school. Because as we all know, and it became very apparent a few years ago, that those kids were handpicked to go to that school. And they kept it as pristine as they could long enough until they got exposed for what they were doing. And so I think it ought to be just open it up for a zone school. That will take care of a lot of the overcrowding in the downtown area there, if those were zone schools. Instead of talking about building more and more schools, I think we need to better utilize some of the buildings we have. And they may not like the way it looks when it's all over with, but I still think they need to be zone schools because there's a lot of growth in that part of the county, and I just think that's what needs to happen there. But I still think the Howard Connect, I think that would be a great place to put them and free up some area there at Howard High School. Use the buildings we already have, and if we're going to put something at Gateway, I think that's probably a good thing. I don't know how much area is there. I don't like the way we're balkanizing vocational. I am vocational. I have been going on 50 years now. I know a little bit more about it than some people in the central office that seem to think that they know something that they really don't know anything about. But you are balkanizing up our vocational program, putting some at this school, some at that school, some at another school. You take this program and you divide it up. The biggest problem you have is finding people to teach it. Because people who are good hairdressers are not teaching school. People who are good electricians are not teaching, or some of them are retired and they go into it after retirement. But it's hard to find good electricians to teach in all these electrical programs. We just balkanized them all up. Cleveland has done it right. They have one vocational center where they put everything, which is what I've begged to do for years, is to put everything in one mega vocation. If we're going to have a mega school, there's where you need to have it in vocational. Have a building for construction, a building for electrical, a building for welding, a building for cosmetology and healthcare, and have one destination for a vocational school. It will never happen while I'm on the board, and it probably will never happen. But all of this moving programs here and taking up space at a place like Gateway, when we already have those programs at other high schools, I'm just not seeing the advantage of doing that. I don't think that helps our overcrowding problem at all. But those are just my thoughts.
Can I respond to that, Ms. Jones? So I'm not trying to say I know more about you. You've made a career in your industry, so I don't want you to hear me saying that. But the argument that we have done damage to career and technical education over the past
You've
7
taken
years.
so many programs out of Sequoia. Sequoia used to have so many programs, and now they're being cut and cut and cut. And I mean, I see it. The teachers call and tell me. And then we cut their programs, and then we say that their enrollment's going down. And after that, I say, duh.
No, chicken before the egg, right? Which one happened, enrollment down or whatever. But what I'm saying is I don't think anyone can argue that over the past 6 years we've put a lot more emphasis on CTE and have actually improved the programming. I think there's a period probably from, 98 to 2014 where it didn't get prioritized and,
Right.
and it was an issue, and I would agree with you 100% on that. But since then, you would lose this one argument with me that we have actually improved CTE education.
Well,
the
some
last
people
6
don't like
years.
CT if for other reasons that I will discuss with you later.
Sure.
A lot of vocational teachers don't like that because they're losing a lot of students because of it. And the funding situation, when it takes funding away from their college programs, that's another thing that a lot of parents don't understand, and I get a lot of calls about that. But I'll discuss that with you
Yeah.
another time. But I'm
Yeah.
not sure that CTE is the end-all, be-all for all people.
Yeah, I don't think it's for all people, and I mean, you know this better than anybody. We're not going to make everybody happy, right? And so that's a difficult part of the conversation. I do want to point out that the overcrowding at Howard, I think, comes in play in 2 other conversations, not necessarily in this one. Next week, we talk about the Brainerd addition and the combining of 6 through 12 program at Brainerd. That will impact Howard Connect and can come up in that conversation, because then we're sitting there looking at Orchard Knob Middle School that's got about 150 kids that will be zoned for Orchard Knob Middle. And then so do we think about using that building in a different way? And I agree with you. I think you've got an easy solution at Howard is Howard Connect side. And we talked about this a year ago, and we've done some things to address overcrowding in what I called the kind of short period of time, which is this year and maybe next year. But we're going to have to do something at Howard Connect, whether it's finding location for, place at Howard, whether it's finding a new location for Howard Connect or thinking about some kind of an addition there. I think that though comes with the Howard conversation and with the Brainerd conversation, not necessarily with the Gateway conversation.
Right. I just was making mention of what Gateway, that was Gateway connected. Miss Black, Mr. Connor.
I was just going to say that as a representative of District 11 in the community, because there are seats from Battle and from Calvin Donaldson that are reserved at Howard Connect for those kids, for enrollment there, that the community has strongly stressed to me that they would much prefer to be in the Gateway building rather than combine at Orchard Knob. And I feel like it's my duty as that representative to deliver that message to all of you. For a lot of different reasons, but because there are kids who are inside the Calvin Donaldson zone and the Battle zone who do go to Howard Connect, and they feel like Gateway is closer to being in their community and a part of their community than Orchard Knob is. So, which is why I brought it up during this discussion.
Thank you, Chair. So I have to push back on one part of that just with some raw data. Do you know what the 3 oldest school buildings in our entire school system are right now? They are 3 magnets. They're CSAS at 1922, Normal Park Upper School at 1931, and Normal Park Lower School at 1938, which might have to push back because I dropped my kids off at a building that says 1896 on the front door, so maybe it's a little wrong. It is in stone. And just to put in perspective, the rest of District 6, I was going to bring up in the next thing, and we can use this as a segue, but Alpine Crest is 67 years old. Rivermont is 69 years old. DuPont, 64 years old. All things that will be addressed in the next section, but all things to think about when we're talking about the age of schools. District 6 is, it looks like by far the oldest school building district, if the data's right. The next thing that needs to be said, I have in this process, I've held some of my own meetings too, and I've specifically reached out to different partners in the community, different people that partner with us to help educate, different people that help facilitate our CTE pathways, and major partners. And one of the biggest things that they asked me was, why was the enrollment down? Why did we not get kids interested in these schools that have been historically interested in it? And I was lucky enough to have a personal experience through my wife. My wife went to a comprehensive high school. She went to a school where there was standard career pathways. There was hairdressers. There was home economics and getting into culinary arts. There's 3 houses across the street from my wife's high school that the students built. And so my wife would open her locker and pull out her AP biology book, and the kid next to her was going across the street to build a house. And the reason I say that is community. We talk so much about community. It's going to be something I talk a whole bunch about when we talk about the next section of this. But those children aren't getting the stigma of having to go to another school. They're not good enough for this school or that school. They're at the school with their neighbors. They're not being bused halfway across Hamilton County just so they can learn a trade. They can do the things they need to have a better future in their neighborhood and on their sports teams and on the basketball team, the football team, the cheer squad, the chess club, all of the above, everything that they want to be a part of as a community. And it really resonated with me from hearing from those people that this is what they want. They don't want to be shipped off somewhere else. They want to be a part of a community. So I think it's great that we're trying to keep those things in the different places. And I would love the chance to come up and see the Saudi Future Ready. That sounds amazing. So I will make sure and make that a checklist item very soon. But
Saudi Daisy, but that's okay.
I'm sorry. I thought I said Daisy.
And this fight
You know what's fun?
words,
Oh, I know.
There is not a Saudi high school.
I corrected myself to a
Just
Saudi
like there's
Daisy
no
T-shirt
red
earlier
and there's
today because we were talking about that and Daisy, and I was like, no, I said it wrong. It's
You
Saudi
gotta get it
Daisy.
right now. They're
High.
gonna come after you.
So
I'm from Daisy.
what did they say, Gary, in the HCS leadership?
If you ain't from Saudi, you ain't from.
Yeah, what is it, Ron?
Nobody.
If you ain't from Saudi, you ain't nobody.
That's right. If you're from Daisy, you must be crazy.
It's a good sense of community. So I thank you. I feel like that's exactly right. I think that there's a strong sense of community to it. And I'll finish with Rhonda. Thank you for pointing it out. And if I haven't been loud enough, then that is on me. But Dr. Robertson knows that I've sat down in a meeting and said that it is absolutely a shame and it was a failure that we did not have Hill City included in Normal Park. That is an abysmal failure. It's something I talked about when I was knocking doors in Hill City. And you're right. Like it needs to be addressed. So definitely.
So we're gonna move on to the
Can I get some clarity on, because
Yeah, I was about to-
at some point, I mean, I feel like we've got clarity in terms of going back and putting something on paper about Clifton Hills, East Side, and
so Gateway
Slate.
sounds like it's in the air, Justin. I hate to say that. It sounds like what I heard was a proposal for CCA to go in there with CTE courses. And then we also heard discussion of possible relocation of Howard Connect to there as well, and opening up the space.
So can we talk about that? Because you're talking about a school with 190 kids in it, and we're gonna put them in a 185,000 square foot building.
No, we're gonna put them in there with them. No, I'm just playing. What it sounded like the recommendation was was to, if you're gonna make it an all magnet building, to make it an all magnet building. So put the Howard Connect. Is that what you were saying, right? Put Howard Connect in the building as well, and CCA in the building as well, and your
You've got
CTEs
two middle
in the-
schools in the same building now.
They're both magnet schools, aren't they?
But one is a Howard Connect. One is a performing arts magnet. Don't get them to beating us up. One is performing arts. One is STEM, right? STEM related. And then you have your CTE. Well, all magnet schools should be PBL. I came from the original one that was built in 1922. That was City High, then Riverside, then Erlanger School of Nursing, then CSAS, and now they want to make it historical. You know, I went to that building. That still looks like 1922 with John Ross on the wall. So that's what I'm hearing, Justin. I'm just telling you what I heard. And then for me, I just like to leave it open.
Could I ask Dr. Robertson a question? So, as you look at the building from Martin Luther King Boulevard, you have the left entrance, which is considered the main entrance, and the right entrance, the lower entrance. What's the square footage difference in the upper level and the lower level? What are their numbers?
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't
Oh.
know if Mike, Kirk, or Tucker knows that off the top of their head. I think it's pretty evenly
Are they,
split.
that's why I was wondering if they were closer, if
Yeah.
one was heavy over the other
No,
one.
I
All
think they're
right.
pretty evenly split. And again, I'm asking this because we need clarity, and I
Right.
hear like the idea of Howard Connect going there with CCA, like that's really not a workable option. I mean, you're putting,
One's on the top level, one's on the bottom, maybe.
Down along the run.
I'm just saying, you're putting two middle schools in the same building. You've got CCA, and then you would have Howard Connect. I'm just putting that out there to consider. I mean, we can go back and put something on paper, but that creates some challenges.
So, and if I,
The building is broken up like that, so maybe we should walk, I've never been in the building.
I haven't been to Gateway either. I would really like to walk
maybe
it.
we should look at it. I don't know going back to Golden Gateway days, you had theirs at the top, Shoney's, New Shoney. Then you go down the escalators and it was Red Food Store. Why
It
you
looks the
laughing,
same.
Rob? Cause that's how it was, wasn't it?
No, it looks the same. The escalator's still there and everything.
Okay, so maybe Howard Connect could go to the bottom where Red Food Store was, and everything else could go to the top, or you need top and bottom? I mean, I'm just thinking, trying to propose what they could look like. I don't know.
I'm thinking about like what the class structure looks like for a CCA middle schooler, because I have one in my house. But they go, to their first 4 blocks are, their regular classes, and then their 5th block is in their major, right? And so, and they take 2 different classes in their major. It's an AB schedule, whatever. And so if you're talking about putting 2 middle schools in one building, if, Howard Connect has a project-based learning all the way through their programming, but, would it be a situation where those kids could attend like English together, math together, and then like have their more specified classes like the arts be separate? I don't know. If you're thinking about like CCA middle schoolers and Howard Connect middle schoolers sharing a space, I don't know. And then for CCA major classes, going upstairs to the arts facilities where the dance practice studio is, and the orchestra room, and all of those things, they would kind of travel between like they do now, because they're all in one building.
No,
I don't know.
no.
I don't know.
Why is that any different than having like a freshman academy, or having Howard connected with Howard High School now? I mean, those are 2 different schools together there.
I think
I mean, do they even
you have
really
to
have
think
to
about,
commingle at all?
Yeah, I'm not worried about commingling. I'm just talking about the highest and best use of a facility where we've now put 2 middle schools in, and we haven't addressed what was clear in this meeting, clear in other meetings, that there is a desire for some connection to CTE. You also saw where the city and the county commission passed the Bend TIF with the understanding that there were going to be career pathways tied to that building. And so, you're talking about
the
it.
Gateway building.
Yes, and so we're talking about over the course of, I can't remember how long the TIF is.
Dr. Highlander's here.
10 years? I mean, 10 years, upwards of $30 million that we would be
38, I think.
deferring.
Okay, so Mr. King it's Mr. King, Faye, and then
Yeah.
Rhonda. Then I want to.
Well, one of the other clarities I needed, so CCA Middle and Howard Middle, either of them have sport programs?
Howard Connect.
Howard Connect does, okay. Because, there's no fields there either. And probably won't be fields there, the Gateway building.
who wants to play sports plays on the CSAS teams.
Okay.
And they kids play on timer team. CSA is keys play for Tyner, extra for Tyner. Make it make sense. I'm just saying, so they could play somewhere else, just hypothetically.
Well, I know when I first heard about the Edney building, the first thing I thought of was oh gosh, you know, Howard utilization is way over 100%. Perhaps we could help them. But then at the community meeting, so many people, you know, still had the love for Kirkman. So it's just like, but why scatter them out? A lot of our future ready 2 schools participate, like at the construction. 2 schools participate at Harrison. So do we want to continually, for distance-wise, have a couple of schools participating at a future-ready school there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very likely that you would see that naturally occur, but I think the big component of, if you go back to the MGT report, there was a mention of having a downtown CT option, and so this is not something that's new. This is just a location that's come up, but I think you would naturally see, you know, maybe a Red Bank or a Howard or Lookout Valley come to this spot more so than someone from Soddy Daisy that's going to Sequoia.
Because there are a lot of business people who want to partner with us.
Yeah, and again, I go back to the TIF that was approved at the city and the county level is evidence that, you know, there is a desire to partner in that building around pathways that would help employers recruit and retain employees and would help us better prepare kids.
Could I ask, could we get Dr. Highlander to, I think there was.
If you want to be here for another hour.
Well, before we get Dr. Highlander, our chairman is on the phone. On the thing, and he has a question of how many students are in Howard Connect enrolled at this time.
It's 188. 186.
So 186, Joe. Now you want Steve to come tell us that we already got put these CTE programs anyway?
No, I've just heard there are, through the city side of things, that there were some stipulations to get the $30 to $38 million. So I was wondering if you could share those stipulations with us.
Main County.
Yeah.
I really can't speak for the city government, but they did say part of the tax abatement for the West Bend area. They said if there is a vocational school there, they would be willing to put those millions into the school system for that.
But
I do not know if they would not do it otherwise. That was the implication I took, but I'm not sure. I can't speak for them, you know, for what they would do. I am thankful that they're offering at least to put some money in. They're not legally required to. It's the county's responsibility to provide education. If the city's willing to put some money into it, but it's just like I told the people at the commission the other day, I said, we do not decide what schools are built and where they're built. I said, that is the job for the school board. And I said, we're the funding body. We can decide whether or not we have the funding to spend on it. But I said, that is not, some people are saying, we need to build this here, we need to build that there. And I said, gentlemen, ours are all gentlemen. We don't have the privilege of having you lovely ladies there. But I said, gentlemen, it's not our prerogative. It's up to the school board to decide what and where. And the city, I do not know, maybe someone from the city government would need to answer that if they would not give it otherwise, but that money. But I do appreciate very much their willingness to offer some monies at any rate. But they said if a vocational school is built, is the way I read it.
okay.
Is that what you
Thank
thought,
you.
Dr. Robertson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Thank you very much.
I tried to be first.
I'm just messing with you.
Okay,
Good to see you.
we have Rhonda and then Marco.
Okay, well, you answered some of the questions then, so the money's not gonna come, so what to get the city to go in and give us the money, for the school, it has to be a CTE? Is that what,
I mean,
Is
that's
that what
fine.
we're-
Tucker and Steve, that's.
Tucker,
that's
get to
it?
this
So,
mic.
so then with this, all this conversation's a moot point.
That's the way it read, but
Okay.
it's not explained.
Okay.
That's the way it's.
Yeah, so in the negotiations with the Ben TIF, normal public education dollars are still there. This is going above and beyond that from the city, and the stipulation is that the the Gateway building, to get that $30+ million, it has to be some kind of vocational
Okay.
pathways there.
So is there,
Okay. Well, then,
is there a reason why they said that?
It ties into the industry that they're looking at for the Bend. I think it's going to be the first time in a couple of decades that they're building 12, 15-story buildings, trying to get major headquartered building or companies here. And then what they're doing with West Side Evolves. I think we're all familiar. The average income for the West Side is about $11,000, and so making sure there's valuable pathways that kind of lead to a thriving wage in that building right across from that is something that's important to them.
So it has to be a vocational class or a vocational school,
I think that's something that we've got to, as this process goes.
or
through.
just a vocational,
It's pathways.
just a vocational pathway?
It says pathways, so I would determine, or my understanding would, that you would expect more than one pathway.
This is public record though, so we can go back and find a TIF on the.
Yeah, it's on there, and we just went through it 2 weeks ago, I believe, Commissioner Highlander, and this came up about getting clarity on that. And I mean, the city was pretty,
But y'all didn't talk to us though.
the city was pretty strong
But
about.
again, it's not, this is the city going above
Yeah.
and beyond. I mean,
So we don't have to take their above and beyond though, right?
we don't.
Mm-mm.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
this is the city going above and beyond normal education dollars. Once they kind of, we were lucky enough to purchase this building, what's going on with the Bend, what's going on with the West Side, they wanted to, invest additional dollars if y'all see fit to go through the CTE,
And this is city
pathway.
council?
The city council, yeah. City council, county commission approved the TIF, but city council and Mayor
I'll just
Kelly
go
did
back
that.
and listen to the discussion. Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely, Mr.
Alright.
King.
So then, Dr. Robertson, I'm gonna ask
Oh,
this.
wait a minute,
and then-
Marco. Oh, go ahead,
Oh.
then Marco, then Ben.
Along that same lines, when we purchased this from Blue Cross Blue Shield, were there any expectations of what was gonna go in that building? Okay, that's what I was,
No, but I think there is a desire from
Right.
Blue Cross.
but not a voiced expectation.
Right.
Thank you.
So, again, you asked for clarity moving forward, and I've been quiet because I don't have clarity. My question was, I wasn't aware of CCA moving in here. It may have been on my fault, so I don't mind. And now I'm hearing CTE, and those two seem not necessarily the same thing. The way I would see it is, again, I'm thinking priorities, and to me, priorities are those buildings that are falling apart. We have a few that we'll talk about. And then secondly, we've got buildings in our hands that need to be utilized as best as possible. From my perspective as to clarity, as you've taken all this, is just, this is what we're proposing. Now that we've listened, now that we've heard, whether it's combining the CTE school with CCA, whether it's, okay, we've listened, this is what we think is the best use of this space for the sake of our community, and we'll get an extra $30 million if we do this, which will be helpful, and all of that to me helps me, when we come down to priorities, say, well, that seems to make sense. I would say, when you get into technical schools, I think one of the questions I have, and I'll do a shout out here to the Gerald McCormick center over at Chat State. Like, we have some programs that are working very well in our community that are, I got the opportunity to tour that for a whole different reason in the summer, and I was really impressed by the level of work that is happening over there. So obviously, I'm not about recreating things that are happening. It's looking at ways to leverage the partnerships with others in the city that might have areas of expertise. But I'm not going to get into what the best way to create a technical school is or not, because I'd be the worst person you invite for that. But I would just say, to me, it's we've got a building, we've got to use it, we've got the Cigna and Gateway. I don't want those to sit unused for the next 10 years. I want to make sure that in this next scope, we put them to good use. So I don't have the answer to what that is. That's why I hope you come up with the best answer.
Okay, so once again, sounds like it's a lot in the air. Just, I think, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is we'll look at some options and maybe by next Monday, bring a couple
Revisit.
of
What
options
CTE
in
programs would
writing.
be put there?
Yeah, and when you do that, Rhonda.
What
had a question
CTE
about
programs
what
would be
CTE
put there? I mean, CTE is broad. I mean,
Yeah,
it could be
I
lots of
think that
things.
you leave room to see what goes on at the Bend, because I think that one of the major components of this is having it connected to the Bend. It's walkable, and so, I mentioned, a computer science pathway, because there are a ton of downtown employers and more coming to the Bend that would need programmers and computer science, talented people. We've got a partnership with Novonix at Lookout Valley. I use them simply because they're the largest employer right now at the Bend, and EV technology is not going away. And so, I would think that something there would make sense, maybe something else in the auto industry. I think you also need to leave room to see what comes to the Bend, so that we don't chew ourselves into something and then it doesn't develop.
Absolutely.
I think what happens at the Bend should dictate what we do in terms of pathways, because again, we want kids to be able to walk and be relatively close to work-based learning opportunities, pre-apprenticeships.
Okay, so, our next,
Oh, I turned mine off. I thought I was going to get called on next.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
man. I thought
sorry.
you turned it off like you didn't want to say
No.
nothing. Okay, go
No.
ahead.
No, that's never happened before.
Go ahead. man.
So talking, I know that the gentleman who wrote this from the city council literally just used this sentence that says, renovate Gateway into a flagship campus featuring CTE from the mayor's proposal. So that was where the thought process was on it. But equally, just this year, CCA added 4 CTE pathways, part of it in partnering with that space that they used to turn into a recording studio. Which goes back to my initial comment about how that seems to check every box that we're looking at. And whether there's another thing there, that's a conversation at the board's pleasure. But CCA doesn't need any space for athletics fields, which we've already established aren't possible at the Golden Gateway site. They already have CTE in place, which means that if we choose to put that school there, then we automatically have an extra $32 million to put into the school and fixing it up and whatever else we need to do. So I don't want to, at the end of the day, I don't want to punish the children because they just happen to go to a magnet school that they tried hard to get into. And luckily we don't have the same sleeping in outside of schools to try to get in, that we have a true lottery to get into these schools. So again, I'm not going to hold it against the child which school their parents helped them get into or were willing to fill out paperwork and be community involved to do so. And saying it one more time, CCA checks all of the boxes to get the extra money for the needs of the school, for the value of the location, and for the ability to use it.
I have one question. How would this, if CCA were to be able to go there with the CTE pathways, because I imagine you still would have to put some other CTA pathway. I don't think that, I have a friend who's a recording artist. I don't think that's the pathway the city and the county looking for. But if you were to do that, would that open up more space for students to enroll in CCA, or would it still cap it off? Because we do know that there's an issue of not being accepted to CCA because there is no space.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've been talking about, at least for the last 18 months, is the, desire to open up more capacity at some of our schools that have long wait lines. I mean, you saw that CSLA, we've opened up more seats at CSAS. We would open up more seats here at CCA, and then potentially if you move Normal Park up on top of the hill, you would open up more, space at Normal Park as well. So part of the strategy is,
We should include Hillside.
high quality
I mean,
seats
y'all
for as
ain't
many
doing it
kids
no
as
favor.
possible.
I am getting
know.
defensive. Like, don't say that, because that sounds like you're doing them a favor. You're not doing them a favor. They should have been there.
Yeah, no.
Madam Chair,
But we,
may I answer
I
with
know,
one?
but that just
and
sounded
then,
kind of like,
we can.
oh, now we can bring you in. We should have brought them in from the beginning. So I don't want to
Yeah.
say that,
Agreed,
because
but-
someone else. I mean, if I took offense, then somebody else out there took offense. So we have to be careful how we say that, because.
may I answer what you just asked?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
you can.
So the CT pathways, like one of the analogies I use is, there's a person at CCA that's running lights and sound, and they're programming that into the lights and sounds and how they move and what's going on. And I'm very generally making this analogy, but that person isn't necessarily going on to be the Broadway lights and sounds person. That person is more likely going on to be a really high up person at Chattanooga. Chattanooga, like at the Chattanooga water treatment place, making sure that the water of Chattanooga is going to the right place at the right time and organizing it. Like, that's how these CTE pathways blend in to not just CCA, but all of our schools. It's learning a lesson to apply it to life and life lessons.
And that's fair. I apologize for stepping, but that was kind of like.
No, we
I didn't
have
get to
any-
vote on that.
Yeah, we didn't get to vote on that, but we can.
And I didn't get to vote on
we
it
can-
either,
we
but
can
I'm just
only move
saying,
forward.
knowing that I know people that they're adults now that didn't get there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, don't say, oh, well, now they get a seat. Well, they should have had a seat.
I spoke to those people at their doors
Yeah,
when
so
I was
don't-
campaigning.
That's why I'm just kind of like, don't.
Stops us from voting to that date, so.
Yeah, so I'm like, we have to be careful with that. But on to the Hickson Red Bank communities and the discussion of the new elementary school in Hickson and what that could look like with the consolidation of with 4 smaller schools that are currently
3 or 4.
Yeah, 3 or 4 of the schools that are currently there that are aging, Alpine Crest, DuPont, Hickson, and Riverland, into one campus. And Mr. Connor, I will give you all the pleasure of speaking to that, because I know that you were a part of not only the conversation that we had from the system, and I know Mr. Smith, Joe had to step out, Sheridan? Okay, I know Mr. Smith is not here, but you were a part of not only the conversation, the meeting that we had as a district, but also you've been a part of pretty much all the community conversations. So if you want to speak to what the community is saying and the takeaways from that, you can.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of.
Have the floor for that.
So I'll take this second to let everybody know that what we're holding and the things that I've been reading from will be on the website by tomorrow morning. So oh, it's already up? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's what the email said after the meeting. So if you want to go ahead and navigate, you can follow along at home. So in our breakdown, you'll get concerns, clarifications, alternative suggestions, expectations for future facilities. And then all of these responses have been rolled up from what the community said in those community meetings. And then I have also the Red Bank survey, and as Kretza mentioned, I've got all of the information from the multiple meetings that I had prior to that. I wanted to read a few things from in the response of rolling up all of the schools together, because again, the way that it was asked was combining 3 schools. So there was increased behavioral issues in larger class sizes or larger buildings, traffic implications. There's some big ones. Questions about environmental impact for the older school sites, which again, to say on the record, Alpine Crest is 67 years old, Rivermont's 69 years old, DuPont's 64 years old, and Hickson is 62 years old. Considerations were especially wrapped around this one, and it's repeated a bunch in the Red Bank survey, is that the local governance of the city of Red Bank and the people that they represent want to make sure that they hold on to their representation in the county, both in two ways. One of which is that right now they're all zoned for my district to District 6, and if they were to be combined at the DuPont location, they would be in District 3. It is to be considered that when your students don't get to go to your own school. Meeting the needs of the students requiring individual supports, all of the IEPs, and the money that does follow those with the new TISA funding model. Alternatives were in this: explore alternative consideration plans for a merger of fewer schools or combining into two schools into one. And then in the priorities is maintaining the unique school features like outdoor learning spaces, which I've heard repeated often. And did Miss Kathy leave? No, there's Miss Kathy, who runs all of the Alpine Crest Outdoor. She's their master gardener. Let's see. Zoning adjustments is an alternative, and robust security. I had one other. Oh, again, sustainability. When you come over to the folks from Red Bank that put together this, I highlighted this, kept repeating. It's extremely important for me to have a school physically located in Red Bank that my son will be able to attend. We need to keep a school within our city limits. I hope the focus will be on providing the most excellent outfitting school possible within the Red Bank city limits. To take away the rights of Red Bank families to have a say in who governs the schools is to take away their representation. Some awesome conversation. I will, at this point, Dr. Handlater, I'm glad you're here, because there was one that said it's high time for Hamilton County to raise taxes and to make investments to all our facilities and teachers that have been deferred for generations. So I will just take this moment to remind that person that we are not our own funding body, and we will ask for whatever we could have from our governance and our funding body. So at the end of the day on this survey, and just so everybody knows, all board members have a physical copy of this and one in their email. Thank you to the Red Bank Commission, and specifically to Jamie Fairbanks Harvey and Stephanie Dalton, who are on the committee from the city of Red Bank to get even more input and support for us. In the overwhelming part of the people that responded here are wanting to keep their neighborhood schools. Now, we've had a lot of conversation today about the size and what that is and scope. There is options in this one. One of the more well-received one was to move Rivermont and add Rivermont and Alpine Crest together at the current Alpine Crest facilities. I do have to mention that would involve a great deal of investment on our part, and potentially a partnership with the city of Red Bank that they have offered. Not in any details, but they have offered to support it because, as mentioned, the age of the schools and ADA compliance that comes up often. So that's kind of where we're at. I want to let the conversation go from there, and if anybody knows me, I'll have more thoughts in a moment.
Okay, so we have Marco and then Rhonda.
So, in full disclosure, when I do my disclosures of family members that work in Hamilton County schools, one of those family members works at one of these schools. And so I not only had the privilege before the commission decided to give it to Mr. Connor, though he wasn't there at the time, to oversee those schools as well. And those are some of my favorite schools in our community for many reasons. I say of our Red Bank schools, to me, they represent Hamilton County demographics as a whole. Like it's the whole diversity of Hamilton County. And they're just amazing leadership, amazing schools in every regard. And I truly have enjoyed every opportunity I've had to be a part of that. So that said, again, I look at those two things. What is MEGA and what are my priorities? When we were at the meeting with the meeting that was coordinated by Hamilton County Schools. I had the privilege, she was sitting in the back at one, oh no, there she is. I had the privilege to sit next to Ms. Evans and, of Rivermont, and ask her, what does a 55% mean? Because that's the ranking, the rating of the quality of the facilities. And so in my list of priorities, all I will say of that is this, is that Rivermont cannot stay within a building that is not worthy of the people of Hamilton County. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to that building, whether it can be remodeled or if it's just not worth it. I'm not a construction person, so I leave that to smarter people than me. That's not hard to find. But anyway, so for me, that became a priority. I mentioned Clifton Hills, I mentioned buildings we already own, and Rivermont became a priority. I had the privilege of walking the grounds of White Oak, and I'd love to hear from our administration about that property. I know that the building probably is not ready for that, but we own a property there, and I don't know enough to know why or why not that would be a good property, or what discussions could be had. And so I can see, I actually thought DuPont and Rivermont at the White Oak location, if that was the case. But I also have heard from many people about the location on Dayton Boulevard, across, or where the former Red Bank Middle used to be. And so honestly, I'm going to say I'm agnostic to each one of those. I really am. I just know Rivermont deserves a location that is worthy of those students. And so whatever we do and however we do it that way. I also believe this, and I believe it very strongly. We can't talk about community without including students who require ADA compliance. To me, that is not community. We can't say we embrace our community, but you, because you're in a wheelchair, have to go over there. And so for me, as much as I love some of our schools, when they were built 70 years ago, nobody cared about that. Or apparently nobody cared. I don't want to say that to people who were around at the time, but apparently that was not first and foremost in our mind. Today, anything that we do moving forward should ensure that all students have a place to belong. All students can participate in the activities of that school. And I know that buildings that are that old aren't. I also know this, and I'll close with this statement. I also know that we get a shot. The money may not be there 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I certainly know for a fact that those buildings will not get better in 20 years. And the investment on old buildings that probably have asbestos, that probably have many things, is sometimes just not reasonable in comparison to the investment in new innovative construction ways to rebuild. So for me, I repeat and I'll summarize. And the last thing, sorry, mega, when I did the math, if we said 600, 700, 800, combining three schools always went over that, no matter which three schools we chose. And so I'm sure there would be additionally some rezoning, but always went over that. So I would recommend looking at two schools and then saying, well, that seems to meet the standard. But I do leave at the discretion of those who know construction better than I do to figure out how that happens. So.
Okay, having talked to some people in Red Bank, because I went to Alpine Crest actually, and Alpine Crest, but it did keep you in shape going up and down those steps, I was going to tell you. You didn't have to take PE because you got it all day long. So I know the issues there with Alpine Crest. I love that school, but it does have some issues. Jamie's here. I know Jamie, I see you out there. I talked with you, and I talked to some other people as well about the White Oak Elementary site. and you did ask some good questions about what the status of that building is. That seemed to be what a lot of people at Red Bank wanted, but also, you call it the former Red Bank Middle School. Actually, I went to high school there, so to me it was a former Red Bank High School property. It had the brick people on the front. Either one of those two sites, which one do you think would be more?
Yeah, so I think the White Oak site, if you've ever been over to that site,
And that's still in the city limits of Red Bank, right?
I believe
Still goes
so.
that far, okay.
It's right by White Oak Park. It's there's some elevation, topographical issues. I mean, it probably from front to back, it is probably 50 feet in elevation. It's pretty sloped.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would have to be some work done around traffic flow in and
Right.
out. But I think it's a site that could look at, right? We own it. We would have to tear that building, the existing building would need to be torn completely down.
So if you have to tear that building down, would it be just as well to build it at Dayton Boulevard?
Well,
I mean, if
so
you're gonna have to build a
you asked
brand
the
new building
Dayton
anyway.
Boulevard
Yeah.
Property, number one, we don't own that. City of Red Bank owns it. And so that creates, we would have to work with the city of Red Bank there. In terms of just layout, not just layout of the property, but also where it sits in terms of location to the 3 other schools, and we would have to do some rezoning with Red Bank Elementary. That site is much easier to build on, would be much easier to rezone, and has a lot of other positives. I know, and you see it in this survey too, there are a lot of people that mention park space, and I think there's a lot of opportunity that if we were able to work with the city of Red Bank, that we could create it and design the building in such a way that we could have a lot of joint space that could benefit not just kids in the school, but also city of Red Bank. So those two options are definitely worth considering. If you're asking my opinion, the Red Bank,
On
old
Dayton
Red Bank
Boulevard.
High School side or old Red Bank Middle side, whichever one you want to look
Okay.
at is.
Okay. Which other school, Rivermont would seem to be the one that would be the most, I guess, convenient, because it's just really right across the
Yep.
hills. The crow flies, it's really not that far.
All 3 of them aren't far. I mean, they're within a
But you're
10-minute
talking
drive.
about DuPont too?
Yep.
Put it there, then we would lose that DuPont property. That's
Well, I
ridiculous.
think I think you can look, number one, we're not quite sure that we would. I mean, we've got to look into that, but even if it holds true to the language, we just have to run some educational opportunity there. I mean, we again, whether you talk about needing pre-K seats for that area, you could look at an option like that. You could look at an option like Opportunity High, providing things there. Even the virtual school could run out of there.
What about, we're not even discussing Hickson Elementary. I thought about Hickson Elementary going to DuPont, maybe, if you were going to combine 2 schools. I mean, that
Yeah, I
would
think
make the
down the
most
road,
sense.
that is something to consider. You're gonna.
But if you give up the property, we don't have the property anymore.
Yeah, I don't think we give up the property. I
well-
think if we move out of there, we put something, when DuPont kids move out, we put some other.
Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm sorry. I mean, you move a school out so you can move another school in.
I'm talking about like the virtual school. Not like that we would just run an educational opportunity, not put an actual school there. It's legalese, and we would have to work with Scott on that. But again, that agreement was so old, and it was with the company that has been bought out. We don't even know that it still holds true.
Yeah, but there again, Marco, you get back into the mega school. I don't want elementary schools that big. That's just
We
it's
would, and
crazy
if
big.
Hickson
if you
and
put
DuPont.
if you put DuPont, Rivermont, Alpine Crest, and rezoned with Red Bank, which Red Bank Elementary currently has some space, you would keep them within that 600 to 800 student range.
But Red Bank Elementary, there you go. It's not in Red Bank. Red Bank Elementary that name needs to be changed. That needs to be Mountain Creek Elementary.
We
It
could
really does,
correct
because
that.
it's not even in Red Bank. I'm not sure that I like putting all 3 of those schools together right there. A couple of them maybe, but I think putting Hickson at DuPont makes a whole lot more sense. And just putting Rivermont and Alpine Crest together makes sense, in my opinion.
So I'm going to speak up against mega schools also, since we've got one in Harrison and it's really had its issues. It is
really not.
much better this year, but it has had its issues. And I know Red Bank Community wants to keep that property, but that property off Dayton Boulevard would be the ideal spot. But you could, and Hickson actually, of the 3 elementary schools, Alpine Crest, DuPont, Rivermont, Hickson of the 4th one is probably in the best shape of all 4 of those. So not necessarily sending students from Hickson to DuPont, but reversing it, renovate Hickson some and send DuPont to Hickson, and then have Alpine Crest and Rivermont together, and then you're only combining the 2.
Well, I mean, I think either way you talk about it, you're rezoning. So whether you rezone part of DuPont to Hickson or all of DuPont to Hickson, I mean, you can manage it between Hickson, the new elementary, and then Red Bank Elementary to make sure that we're in good spaces.
Right. I just, and I know, you know, the building site, and I liked what you said about sharing the facility joint, whether it's through joint contracts or just, you know, joint usage with the community. I'm going to say that putting 3, we talked about, you know, Clifton, when we talked about closing Clifton Hills, we talked about rezoning with 4 other schools. And, you know, bleeding the numbers lower so that none of them hit that 800 or higher. But
It's funny.
So Hickson element.
Yeah, Clifton Hills comes up, and we were meeting at Clifton Hills with the faculty there. They're like, we don't like mega schools. Like, Clifton Hills is the size that we're talking about. Like, we're talking about schools that are 750 kids, and that's what Clifton Hills is. So again, there's been a lot of confusion about this. We're not saying that we would take, even if we did DuPont, Rivermont, and Alpine Crest, and just move them into a new school without looking at zones that could help balance that between, again, whether you say Hickson, Red Bank in the new school, or just Red Bank in the new school. But you can certainly, with the number of kids that are in those zones, make it to where you're talking about elementary schools that are within that 600 to 800 student range.
But let me ask again. So, of the elementary schools, Hickson is in the best shape
Yes, sir.
of all 4 of those. All right.
Okay, we have Mr. Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So, a couple of things to put on here too, because and I'm kind of rolling off of what Gary just said about the mega schools. We need to be thinking about the future and the growth, and the growth could be more than we even anticipate if we put it into 2 schools, 2 schools into 1. We've got about 700 potential apartments in Hickson, 300 unit housing development going in Lupton City at the mill. 50 unit condominium complex in South Red Bank, a 200 plus apartment complex on Dayton Boulevard, townhomes, 17 to 20 housing units in South Red Bank on Strawberry Lane, and then the massive sprawling hundreds of units that are on Morrison Springs right now, being built. Sorry, not open. Probably not the same as the ones downtown that are having the single professionals in them. Definitely more family-oriented buildings and structures that are going to support 2.5 kids and a dog. So it's important to think about those when we're talking about anything on this. Now, in this in this survey that was done by the community of Red Bank that I just put over here, if consolidation had to happen, their first choice is overwhelmingly White Oak. Now, I'm hearing you, and I'm listening that you're saying that that's a cost and zoning are issues there, less than the Dayton Boulevard property. But something to remember, and just in the conversation line that we need to make sure that we remember and that could happen is that at White Oak, we as a school system don't have to give anything. We can just build the school and it's done. But if we built it, either if we redid Alpine Crest and had that 17 acres, or if we built it at, well, I guess, no, we wouldn't have to do it at, never mind, I'm second guessing myself. We wouldn't have to change anything at Alpine Crest. We would, if we built another school, we'd probably wreck some of the gardens to rebuild it in the process. If we were at the Dayton Boulevard site, we would have to get into an interlocal agreement with the city of Red Bank. So there would be concessions made to the city of Red Bank, correct? Anything,
Absolutely, yeah.
anything they ask for, essentially, right?
Well, no.
Well, that we agree on too.
Yeah.
Okay, so just putting it before the board, because this has been a question that's come up a bunch of times about what the difference in the two is, and that's the big difference. Is if we're at Dayton Boulevard, if we're Rhonda's old high school, old alma mater, then the city of Red Bank could say, we want you guys to dedicate X amount of acres to a park or a library or any of those things. So just making sure that the board knows that, because I want to make sure we have all the information. Because the thing that I have left every single one of my conversations with is I'm not gonna let there not be an elementary school in Red Bank. That's the end of the day. We've got to do it, as Rhonda said a bunch of times. We got to do right by them. We built an elementary school stone's throw from city limits and named it after them. So we need to fix that.
Mr. Wingate and then Mrs. Black.
Ben,
Sir.
I'm trying to make sure I heard you right. Did you say responses were overwhelming to have a school at the White Oak site? Did I hear you say that right?
So according to this, if it's, the first one is just keep them all the same. But if there is any consolidation, the choice of, if there's any consolidation, I can't talk tonight, then the first choice would be to consolidate at the former White Oak right here.
Okay, so no,
No.
so what, the way I read that is.
Alpine Crest.
It says consolidate, at the White Oak Elementary site, which is option 4, which is in green, correct?
I'm sorry, yes, and I did mean only, they're saying if there's consolidation, that is this last one. Yeah, it was the fourth option on there.
Right,
But that
so
was
the
the
fourth option was actually
consolidate
number
Alpine
5
Crest. At
in
Red
terms
Bank
of
Middle.
responses.
Yeah. The,
No, I'm saying the White Oak you said the White Oak location was the overwhelming.
I'm sorry.
If there was a consolidation.
yes.
Okay,
And
according
by
to
not
this
reading.
chart,
I'm sorry.
it's in green, so that was,
I'm sorry. Of the two alternate choices, you're absolutely right. I misspoke. If you're reading this in order, the first one is to not do anything.
right.
The second one is to consolidate into Alpine Crest. The second one is to consolidate into Rivermont. And I was just speaking to the two locations we were talking about, the White Oak property.
Okay, because
Or the-
when I'm looking at these responses,
Hold on.
the overwhelming response from the 196 people that responded to this was, as you say, do nothing. Keep Alpine Crest, Rivermont, and DuPont Elementaries open in their current buildings, which is the blue bar on the chart. The second highest response, which is the purple bar on the chart, is option 5, which is consolidate Alpine Crest and Rivermont Elementaries into new school building located at the former Red Bank Middle School site. Somebody help me if I'm missing that, because that's the way I see that.
If Jamie and Stephanie want to come to the podium, they can answer. They were the two that ran this.
Well, I mean, I
for the
understand it. Just,
City of
I
Red
mean,
Bank.
that's the way I'm reading that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, purple is option 5, and option 5 is consolidate Alpine Crest, Rivermont Elementaries into new school building located at former Red Bank.
So please, as a chair, would you like to ask them to come and answer?
I think it's just a bad design on.
Miss Dalton, can you come clarify, please? Mrs. Dalton, I'm sorry.
Yes, there are limitations with Google Forms, so apologies for that, and also the exporting of the charts. But yes, Mr. Wingate, you are correct. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is most preferred to least preferred. So most preferred was, as you all already stated, to keep all of them open as is. Least preferred was to consolidate Rivermont and Alpine Crest at the former Red Bank Middle School property. Second, as you stated earlier, Mr. Connor, if consolidation must happen, the preference was to consolidate Alpine Crest and Rivermont into a new school building at the current Alpine Crest site. And then the next choice was the White Oak Elementary site. And this survey was only open for a week, so we had a very short turnaround time.
Is there a way for us to get this digitally?
It was emailed to you earlier today.
Was it? Okay, cool.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll look at it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Okay, so finishing out my thought is, I guess not finishing out, restating, is there's things to be thought about for each different scenario. And one thing I wanted to be on the record is that's the only one in the scenario that we could enter into a interlocal agreement where they could ask for things. Otherwise, we're choosing a site we own and we build what we want.
It's true, but I mean, let's be clear, the city of Red Bank is gonna want the Alpine Crest site as soon as we walk out the door.
That would be the trade.
Right. So really what needs to happen, which hasn't happened, is if this is the route we're gonna go, if we're gonna say, let's think about something other than DuPont, whether it's Ms. Jones and I sitting down with the city of Red Bank, but somebody from the board and I need to go meet with the city of Red Bank to talk about what this looks like. Because, you know, yes, it's gonna take some work for us to go together, you know, and think about the old middle school property. But it's also gonna take some work at the White Oak property, because it's not, the roads there are not wide, and there would need to be work coming from both of us.
And to restate something I said earlier, the city of Red Bank in their commission meetings has offered to assist us in this, specifically with demo if needed and things that have been mentioned. Site prep. So I would say that I would.
White Oak?
They did say at White Oak, I think it was like an open offering. But again, I think that is a great idea. I think if there's a possibility of you guys being able to do that before the next meeting, or at least before the December meeting.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, Ben Connor, I'll work for you.
I don't.
And it's Thanksgiving week. And next week, the people I work for got me in Atlanta in a training. After I only got Monday here, then I'm in Atlanta, the 28th through the 30th. So
Well,
I
my
can't
next
make that
thing
happen.
was going to offer myself to help there,
No, you
but
don't.
you're the board chair, so I was not going to.
So if it is the pleasure of the body to have that before the next meeting on the 27th,
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's.
then
fair.
Mr. Connor, you're gonna have to go.
I would.
Before the December meeting would be.
Is
Oh,
it?
you said before the December meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no, I probably could do that for you after November 30th.
If you could do that for the community, that would be wonderful.
I could do that.
And it-
With as long as, well, we have to check with Mr. Robertson's.
I
schedule
I
as well.
definitely want to
Dr.
have an
Robertson's schedule as
open
well.
line of communication between the Commission of Red Bank and this board to make sure that before we decide to do something with their property, we've got at least a small agreement. And I will, again, this is your committee and you are the chair, but I love sitting on it and I will gladly offer my services at any time.
So, I mean, I don't mind.
Representative of that community, too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't mind Ben can go. I mean, he is
That's fine.
What's his
more
community?
closely connected as he does represent that community, and then reporting that back. Okay, and then, so I have Mr. Wingate.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to leave that.
Okay, now I have Mr. Perez, Mrs. Black, and Ben, you coming back to you?
No, my light doesn't turn on.
Okay, there you go. So Mr. Perez and then Mrs.
So
Black.
just very quickly, two things I did hear very strongly. One has been repeated 20 times, and I agree with 100%. I think Red Bank should have a school within their boundaries. And the second, really at the meeting that we were at, very strongly, people really do not like the DuPont site. And that was clear in the small groups. It was clear loudly, but yelling doesn't necessarily mean you're right. But it was just made clear that site, I tried to drive it in traffic times that would affect our schools, and that was one of the big concerns, is just the traffic there is already really difficult with schools, large schools that would be even more. So those two things were clear, and I think we have many options within that, but I'll leave that to those of you, again, who can have those meetings with Red Bank.
I'm just going to reiterate the preference for 2 schools, not 3. If we didn't change the zone at all and not counting all of the new housing that's going in, Alpine Crest, Rivermont together would be 628 students. DuPont, Hickson together would be 663 students. So building a school that could, and renovating Hickson to accommodate 800 kids and building a school that could accommodate 800 kids would leave us a lot of room for growth to take up, make up for all of the housing that's coming in. I share the concerns about the DuPont site, putting a really large school that is serving that many kids on that site with the traffic. I love the idea of taking one of our properties, either DuPont or Rivermont, and renovating it to be a pre-K building and providing more pre-K classrooms. Because like you said, in some of these schools that are getting really close to being full or are full, I know in Eastside Elementary, they have a portable for the first time this year, and it's to accommodate their pre-K classrooms. And so, if we can find even multiple sites where we can look at maybe partnering with the city and providing free pre-K, I think could be a good partnership. Also, there's the Graduation Success Program that's at the 40th Street building. If we had something like that at the DuPont site, it could open up that program for kids in the northern part of the county who may have transportation issues to get all the way downtown and all the way to the south side on 40th Street. And that program has been very successful in helping kids get to graduation who've struggled to get their credits in a traditional way. So I think we have a lot of options for if we're saying, that we're going to, consolidate some of these schools, move some of these schools. We have a really great opportunity to do something really interesting with some of these sites that we're moving out of. And that really excites me. I think we should listen to the people of Red Bank about what they want in their community. And they don't want us to build it on Hickson Pike. But again, I think we have some opportunities to work with our local municipalities and partner. But yeah, I would just reiterate that, 2 schools, not 3.
Rhonda?
Just as a side note, I want to know how much funding we get from the state for our pre-K and how much we're having to come up with ourselves. Because that's not our charge, pre-K, and if we're having to come out of our money to expand pre-K, I want to know where the money's going to be coming from. I just need to get some clarity on that. Thank you.
Is there nobody else?
So, Justin, you want to speak to that?
I think she was just asking if we go down that
I
road.
just want to see.
that-
I
yeah.
want the board to be given that information.
And I think some of what, expanding, could be in partnership with other people, but even just finding a site for those to be centralized to where we don't have 2 classrooms in this building, that would help. and
But if the
wouldn't cost
state's
us.
funding it, fine, but if we're having to come out of our pocket with it, that's not our charge. So,
Yeah, and the state does, our programs are state lottery or Title
yeah.
I funded, or they're Chattanooga Head Start sites. So we're not currently, it's funding out of there.
Yeah.
Mr. Khan?
I was going to just speak to that. We actually just last week, as a school board, state school board association, passed a resolution supporting I lost it. It was just called the Preschool Act. But so, Rhonda, there should be additional funds coming if that bill passes. So that's a good thing for us to help and pay for it.
Except we have to build the buildings.
I think it's supposed to help for all encompassing.
So do you feel like you have
I'll get with
enough to
Mr.
go back?
Connor and see if we can
Okay.
schedule a time to meet with the City of Red Bank.
Okay, so next we will take public comment. We have 6 individuals that signed up for public comment. We will handle this process the same way that we handle it during our board meetings. And do I need to read the disclaimer? Okay. Well, I'm not gonna read the disclaimers. Just come here and be real nice, okay? Make good choices, like I tell my 4-year-old. Make a good choice when you come up here. But you have 5 minutes to speak to speak before the board. And the first person that we have that wants to come and speak is Kathy Ryan.
Good evening, Board, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you again about the proposed closing of Alpine Crest Elementary. This is not in my speech. I'm so excited about what you have talked about tonight. You have to remember this was written before all this conversation. I spoke to you back in September. As a reminder, I live in Red Bank. I have 2 grandsons who attend the school, and for this reason, I am one of the vice presidents on the PTA board. I'm also one of the master gardeners who help maintain the wonderful outdoor space where Alpine resides. And being there are multiple master gardeners who help, I'm just one of them that helps.
You're
But
just my
anyway,
favorite.
I have,
Being as an elected official, you never say that. Go ahead, Ms. Ryan.
So, anyway, I have heard repeatedly over the past several months Hamilton County can't keep all these neighborhood schools open. But Alpine is the only remaining elementary school in Red Bank city limits, which you have definitely confirmed. And so I was going to say, how in good conscience can you close this school? And I have been at the school a lot between all my volunteering, and I do see the neighborhood connection all the time. A couple of weeks ago, the Red Bank High School cheerleaders and football players held a pep rally at the school, and this wouldn't happen if there was no school there. The school is also having a float in the Red Bank Christmas Parade on December 1st. Again, there would be no elementary school float representing Red Bank if the kids were shipped over to Hickson. And last week, the PTA sponsored a breakfast on 2 mornings for the students and their families. It was so awesome to see all the families at the school. I still don't think that would happen at a much bigger school in Hickson. And when our master gardeners had a work day in September to prepare for our arboretum, we cleared everything in 2 hours because we had parents, grandparents, teachers, and neighbors who came out and helped. Last week, I spoke with our principal, Mrs. Jackson, and this is her first year at Alpine. She said she had been at a lot of good schools, but she had never experienced this type of environment before. It's like family, she said. There are teachers and support staff who have been there over 20 years. These people are the reason Alpine is so special, not the building. You can't provide a better education in a new building. In fact, studies show some students will be lost moving to a much larger school. Every child at Alpine receives a quality education because of this nurturing environment. But again, I want to point out the awesome property where Alpine resides. And this can't be built at a new location either. In October, we had 2 professionals in their field visit the school. Gene Hyde, who is retired from the Tennessee Department of Forestry, came out to verify our 34 arboretum trees. The other was Mary Beth Sutton, who is the founder and head of Waterways, a local nonprofit that educates about the importance of our watersheds. Both of them were very impressed with our outdoor campus. Speaking of our campus, please think outside the box when it comes to our building. Yes, it was built in the 1950s, but $500,000 was spent on improvements last year. That's a lot of money to waste if you close the school. And yes, you could add ramps, either permanent or temporary, for access. But also, there's a large flat piece of property where a new school could be built. In fact, one grandparent I spoke with said this had been mentioned in the past. Because of the 17-acre property, Alpine would be a great location for a forest school. Something to think about. And with that, I want to get everybody a copy of our tree list. Oh, okay, thank you. Our tree list, and one of our master gardeners, John McKenzie, the past 2 Saturdays has made up a bird list of birds he saw over just 2 Saturdays. 42, I believe, species are on there, including he saw 2 bald eagles. So again, the outdoor space just cannot be replicated. Our PTA sent an invitation to each of you and Dr. Robertson for a breakfast and tour of our campus on Monday, December the 4th at 8:45. I hope to see as many of you as possible. Mrs. Jackson will give a tour of the inside of the school. I will give a tour of the outside campus. I will end with what Mrs. Jackson shared with me last week. Her favorite time of the day is in the morning when the students arrive. She loves to see the happy faces and some skipping into the school. I don't think you'll see any student from Alpine skipping into the DuPont property. Please keep our neighborhood school in Red Bank where it belongs. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we have Miss Stephanie Dalton.
Hello, board members. Thank you for letting me come up here again today. You all know how we all feel. I think we've made it very clear at all of our community meetings, in the survey, and just conversations that we've had with you all. I just wanted to kind of give some further context around a couple of things. One thing I wanted to note, Mr. Connor talked about growth that's happening in District 3 and District 6 that would really, I think, make it challenging to just rezone and kind of offset some numbers, is that a vast majority of Red Bank is currently under a sewer moratorium. And that means that we have large swaths of residential property that cannot be developed on because they can't get hooked into the sewer system because we're under the moratorium from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. We have a sewer maintenance that's been going on through WWTA for the past almost 2 years, I think, going on 2 years, and they think that that's fixed the problem. And so in the next 12 to 18 months, they're going to be monitoring that, and as long as there are no overflows, which is terrible to think about, but as long as there aren't any, they'll lift that moratorium, and we are going to have massive swaths of land that are going to be able to be developed. So just thinking about that as far as future housing development that will be coming, in the next few years in our community. And then the other point that I wanted to make was in reference to the former Red Bank Middle School property / former high school property. The original high school is that we have just closed an RFP. And our staff members have elected an applicant to do master planning for our city for the first time in its 68-year history. And that is also going to include a separate, but through the same consulting firm, small area study of the former Red Bank Middle School property. And we are actually voting on this tomorrow evening. So once we vote, as long as the vote passes, we will hire that firm, and then they will be working with us to do those planning efforts. And so that has made the conversation and the timing around this facilities conversation very challenging because we have all pledged to engage our community around what they want to see at that former Red Bank Middle School property, and what our community needs and wants, what gaps we have in maybe housing, maybe a school, and commercial space potentially. So we are dedicated to having those conversations with our community and listening to our neighbors and letting them guide that planning process. We all in open meeting decided together, the 5 of us, that we weren't comfortable making a decision about that property until we get through this process. And so I just wanted to give you guys some additional context around that property in particular. And I know it's kind of out of everybody's hands that this has all been kind of thrust on all of us. And we're having to have these conversations, regardless of these things. But I just wanted to let you guys know that. But we are going to be starting that planning process ASAP. That firm is going to be at our Christmas parade on December 1st from 4 to 9 p.m. in case anybody is interested, and festival. And so they'll be there already starting to engage the community. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Giselle Palmer. I'm sorry.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I had the opportunity to visit most of the community meetings and go around to all the different neighborhoods and just listen. I was very invested in the one in South Chattanooga because I'm a teacher at Eastside Elementary. And so that one really impacts me and my students a lot. The students of Clifton Hills are right down the street from us, and so that one was going to be a big impact on us. And then I live in Red Bank, right down the street from Alpine Crest, so that one also was a big impact on me as it's my neighborhood school. And then I traveled out to Brainerd, and I just kind of sat in to listen because I was curious, you know, what the community there was going to feel and think. And then I traveled out to Saudi Daisy to see what the community there was thinking and feeling, and just really felt like I was getting, it was really interesting because each neighborhood was so different, and each community, however, had very similar responses to how they felt. We love our schools, and they felt very connected to their communities. And I think that just connected back to so many things that we believe as a school system and as a district. You know, we believe every student learns, every student belongs, every school needs to be equipped, right? And every employee valued. There's a lot of teachers here today. And every community served. We want every community served, right? And yet there were a lot of families, I saw a lot of parents who felt like a sense of, like, do they really care about us? Lack of trust. Teachers felt that as well, I noticed. But as I come here to the meeting today, I really feel like the board members, the people, you know, the central people from central office have listened. They've collected a lot of this information and have really come back. I felt like a lot of people trusted their school board members in various communities, but weren't sure if their voice would be heard by the larger community. And I think their voice was heard by the larger community because I see that each person came back and had a voice to share with the larger community. So I think that's great that those voices were heard. And you know, I think that, you know, we as a group, you know, we have a lot here that we need to look and say, okay, what are we going to do for these kids? And I think that as a collective whole, you know, there are some decisions that need to be made. And I think that some tough decisions need to be made. But I think that we're on a good path. And I think that, you know, as a group, we do need to make some decisions. I for one, in Red Bank, I think the 2 schools plan is a good one. I know that traffic there on the corner of DuPont, it's awful. And 3 schools there, that's not gonna work. I agree on what y'all are talking about at Clifton Hills. It's already so packed there, and it's growing. We get new kids every day. Clifton's getting new kids every day. There needs to be some forward thinking there. So I think those are some really good things to think about. But kudos to all of you. Kudos to the trust that your communities have, each of you. And thank you for your service, each of you.
Thank you. Kristen Light.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Light, and my son Lucas is a kindergarten student at Clifton Hills Elementary. And additionally, I serve on the faculty at Clifton Hills and have for the past 13 years. So I'm here today representing our parents and our community to ask you to reconsider your plan as it stood originally. I'm really encouraged by what I've heard you say tonight, and it does seem, as Giselle mentioned, like you are listening to the community, and I really would like to say I appreciate that and your thoughts on it today. Because we agree, our building is in disrepair, and we need a plan to address the growth in our community and the adequacy of our facility. We need an immediate plan, as Mr. Perez continues to emphasize. We need some sort of plan. However, we do not believe that this should be at the expense of family engagement. Our main concern is that family engagement is key in the growth of a student, and parent access to the school is extremely important, especially in high poverty areas. Many of our families walk to school and walk to parent events because they don't have adequate transportation or resources to travel by car. Closing our school and relocating our students to Eastlake or Eastside would create a massive barrier to parent involvement in the school. I've heard some of you kind of mention the distance or the time of the bus ride. That's not really the issue. The issue is the walking path. It's treacherous and unreasonable to ask a person to walk it kind of no matter the distance. A mile sounds like walking distance, but when it's a busy street and busy highways, it takes on a different tone. So our students already face a lot of barriers, and we should not put up another one that blocks their families from being engaged in their education. Parents need access to their students and deserve a chance to be involved. Our faculty in school has also worked really diligently to build trust in our community, and parent involvement has improved steadily every year. In a community where it can be difficult to build trust and engagement, we have the trust and support of our community. Since this building plan was released, our parent voices have been very clear and united in expressing to us and to you at the community meetings that they don't want the Clifton Hill site to be divided. Over 995 community stakeholders have signed a petition asking that you please reconsider that plan. And our parents attended the listening session in great numbers to give voice to their wishes that we remain open. They trust our faculty and are invested in our school, and we believe that relocating to another school would negatively impact our students for years to come. We agree we need a long-term plan, though, to address the facility at Clifton Hills Elementary. We don't think closing it and dividing is the answer, and we ask that some of these other options would be explored. We don't understand why we can't expand the building or why we can't build a new building. We have a large amount of land behind our building that never floods, judging by our eyes. You know, when it rains, it doesn't get flooded. Why can't we build there, build up there? I also want to answer, some of you kind of asked, like, does it flood? So I've been there for 13 years, and so I've seen a lot. I remember one day in my entire time there that it flooded so bad it kind of like we couldn't really navigate the parking lot, and that was the day that the entire district closed as well. Like, we all got to school, and then it was like, never mind, you know, and we all went home, but that was the entire county. Beyond that, we've had some issues in the past with our parking lot flooding, but whatever they did, you mentioned, I think they did some work, and for years now, it hasn't really been an issue. And even the flooding that you mentioned last year, first day of school, they've now built a bridge, thank you so much, so that will not be an issue. So our thoughts kind of as a community are, why can't we work around it? Why can't we do this for our students? They deserve a nice building in their neighborhood that they can access. So of all these schools, I think it's been mentioned a lot that Clifton Hills is in the worst shape with the most students. So they deserve the investment in their future, in their neighborhood. And I believe that it's our duty as a county and a community to give it to them. So.
Jackie Wallace. I lost my space. I apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Is it possible for me to ask questions, or may I just speak?
Well, you can ask questions,
Okay.
and I will follow up when you're done
Thank you.
to protect your 5 minutes.
So many of the issues that I have been concerned about have been addressed. Mostly I'm concerned with the health of our children. I consider the DuPont property totally inappropriate for numerous reasons, mostly because of the pollution they'll be exposed to at recesses and the length of time they'll be enclosed there within that pollution. And serendipity, I was going by there at 4:05 this afternoon on Hickson Pike, and I have a picture on my phone where two cars had collided, gone over the fence, and collapsed on the property where the school would be built. So I think that there's just so many reasons. But you all given me so much to think about, and so many things I was concerned about you're addressing. I will say two things. The size of the schools, I was thinking, well, yeah, that sounds good because it's reasonable to me to combine, two schools and, two schools into one. But then I heard all the speaking about how much the populations are growing up. There's no way Red Bank's going to be able to accept more children if there's hundreds of apartments going up there that are reasonably priced. They're not the downtown apartments. There'll be a lot of children moving there. And if Red Bank's going to grow the way Red Bank's growing, there's not going to be any room at a Red Bank facility or a White Oak facility for more children. So it sounds to me like possibly the solution is going to be possibly 3 schools, possibly DuPont and Rivermont, which aren't going to grow as much because that whole Riverton area, they're going to send all most of their kids to private schools. I mean, we know that's the way the enclave was. I live over in that area. So those could be combined at a school that's going to be, 500 and something. Remodel Hickson. Alpine Crest has 17 acres. And I'm a master gardener with Miss Kathy, and we will be glad to redo the gardens. But there's 17 acres
Another one of my
there.
favorite master gardeners.
Good answer.
His very favorite one.
But there's plenty of room there, and Alpine Crest is going to be, I consider, difficult to make it ADA accessible. But with that much land, you could build a school. It might be small to start with, but Red Bank is growing. They've they've reduced the size that lots have to be from, whatever they were. And my mother, when we sold her house after she passed away, had to have the septic system redone because she wasn't on sewer. So once they get all that, Red Bank's going to grow. Alpine Crest would grow. And there's room for growth at that facility, just like there's room for growth at the Red Bank facility. So you've given me so much to think about, but you've obviously addressed so many of my concerns. Anyway, that's pretty much all. Oh, and that's pretty much all I have to say. Thanks.
Did you have a question?
No, actually, I think I said everything.
Okay.
I'll go back to the next one.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wallace. And then we have Mr. Michael Kirk.
Madam Chair, I signed up thinking that I was signed up as an attendee. I had no
Thank you for attending. We appreciate
I thought his
that.
face looked familiar. He's from the county.
Yeah, Mike Hertz, the new director of facilities for the county, so overseeing all the
Okay.
county buildings. So good.
I didn't put the
opportunity for you
name, but
guys to meet him.
when I looked at him in his face, I'm like, that man from the county. Okay.
been on some committees here.
Okay. All righty. So we thank you all, each and every one of you, for taking time to spend the last 2.5 hours with us to talk about to talk about some very important topics, though. And so we thank you for that. And we appreciate you, those of you that were able to share your comments with us tonight. Please know once again that we have taken notes. We hear you, and we will continue to deliberate and talk about those things as we meet in times to come. We will be meeting next Monday, the 27th, at 6 p.m. We will start promptly at 6 p.m. To discuss the remaining community meetings that were held as well. That's I'm finna get this wrong. I probably shouldn't do this.
Hang on a second.
It's Brainerd
Yep.
and Delwood, Soddy Daisy Middle, Howard Connect, and Thrasher. Okay, I got it right. Okay, so we will be doing that next Monday at 6 p.m.
Can we meet wherever Joe is?
If you're paying. Nevertheless, this meeting is adjourned.
Jamie Fairbanks. Jamie, that's what I know you as. I need to talk to you.